Welcome to the Fullcaster Podcast, episode 20, and the finale for season 1 of the FCP. Our guest today is a special one, fresh off a big weekend at the CalSpeed Super Series, and one of the absolute best in the sport karting business, Diego Morales. We're going to chat with him more about not just the season and him getting some big cups, some big championships for him, but also some of the stuff he's done further back, because I've known him for several years, going back into the Arrive and Drive stuff. But before we do that, Dirk, current event time. The most current of current events, the hurricane that we're in right now.
Yeah.
Freaking nuts here at CalSpeed.
Sans water. All the other elements are happening.
It is windy as hell outside right now, and you might even be able to pick it up from time to time on the mics here. It's blowing like a sumbitch out there, and the track's seen better days. Dirk's he's got a lot of work ahead of him.
Yeah. Work quite literally cut out for me right now.
Yeah, it's going to be fun putting everything back together. But aside from that, going on right now, it is fresh off the season finale for the Super Series and the Ironman.
Saturday,
yeah, all the Arrive and Drive stuff, but also the Tri-C Championship's been done and dusted here in October. And you know, this time of year, usually at the end of October, we're pretty much done.
Right.
And we got, usually Rock the Rio, Super Nats, things like that happen in November. Obviously, Rock the Rio is here in a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. Actually, this last weekend was also IKF Grand Nationals that just finished up. So kind of everything winding down a little bit. And I know that LAKC still has a couple of makeup rounds.
Yeah, scheduled 2 more. But yeah, typically they would have had their finale this last 2 weekends ago. So
it's kind of a wind-down time for most people. And actually, you and I already talked, my season finished a long time ago, but even you're kind of hitting the end button, if you will, and concentrating a little bit more about what might happen for next year.
Yeah, I mean, once the shutdown ended and we're able to get back, I just was able to, reconnected with the sponsors, and we got out the funding for the rest of what the calendar said, which is up to October. And then they announced the makeup dates, and I'm like, I'll just chill out and get some testing in to get ready for next year.
Yeah, and it's not exactly been a smooth season for you. I mean, you had one or two mechanical issues, not of your doing, and then also got involved in a couple of incidents, not of your doing. But the points weren't there, so it's not like you had this championship carrot hanging out in front of you.
So I'm like, I can go spend a little bit less money and test as I need to, and not have the pressure of a race day on me as well. Because whether I'm going for points or not, I want to try to do as best as you can, right?
Right.
But it's just tough showing up on a race day when you don't drive too often. So
no, for sure. No, I know how that is as well. And with the season pretty much in the books, and you kind of looking at next year. I mean, kind of looking at our first season here at the FCP Fullcaster Podcast in the books here after this one, episode 20 or 21st episode for us.
Right.
It's been a hell of a lot of fun. It's been really cool.
Man. Like, we talk about it all the time, throughout the week and stuff, but all these guys that we've known for so long are like, one of the guys that comes to mind is Beechner.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've known him for a while. We've always had really good conversations here in the paddock, whether they've been for good or bad reasons. But to sit down and hear everyone's stories has been super neat and get an understanding of who they really are.
For sure. And then, we've talked about the kind of the response. Everybody's kind of come back and be like, oh, man, I really appreciate you guys doing this and whatnot. And I mean, not to be altruistic, like we weren't doing it for everybody. It was we did it because we thought it'd be kind of fun.
Right.
But it's certainly become something that's been really cool to hear people enjoying it and whatnot. And speaking of those things, we're going to do more here in the off season as we get through November and December with getting your guys' feedback. We've tried to get more feedback and find out what people want to hear and that kind of stuff. And just talking about what we're going to do for next year. I know we've already got our season 2 episode 21 is what it'll be.
Season 2 opener, yeah.
Yeah, the first one's going to be with Stu Hayner with MDG.
At his shop.
Yeah, we're actually going to try to do some more of these on location stuff, get some love to the local shops and whatnot. And Stu Hayner with MDG is going to be the first episode, as you say, at his place. I'm really looking forward to that one. Hopefully all of our shit works over there.
Yeah.
It's one thing doing it in-house where we know where everything is.
It'll be pretty neat actually going to a shop, because it's not something that exists so much nowadays. I mean, everyone's
the brick and mortar, right?
Everyone's a race team, but to actually have a shop where you can go to and shop is kind of neat,
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I think going back to everyone really enjoying the show. That's the biggest word that we've heard is appreciation.
Yeah.
And it's cool hearing the paddock have that towards us, and it's all for fun, but it's cool that everyone's so involved in this now.
Yeah, for sure. And hearing, hey, you guys talk to this person, talk to that person. Well, a lot of them have been on our list already.
Right.
There's some people like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. I'm going to try that too. And season 2 will have another 20 or so episodes, and they'll go out every couple of weeks. And yeah, it's going to be pretty fun to get things going. But getting back to what just happened, obviously we did just have the Super Series finale. And our guest today, like I said, is fresh off of a big championship, and I know he's going to be looking forward to talking about that, and I'm looking forward to talking to him. So let's go ahead and waste no more time and bring him on, Diego Morales. Diego Morales, thanks for coming out here on Monday, and you had to take a little bit of time off work.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Hi, guys. Good
Hello.
to be here.
Thanks for coming out, and we'll just jump into it. Speaking of work, what is it that you had to take off from?
Well, I wish it was some motorsport-related thing, but no, it's actually fairly boring. I'm a director of finance and operations. I work for a commercial real estate company. And we actually develop workforce housing. So
Okay.
I'm part of, trying to get more housing into SoCal at a level where people really can't afford it and prices keep going up. We're developing housing for that piece. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I feel really good about that. It's a great company. It's a startup. And yeah.
So you say it's a startup, and how long have you been doing that? Or have you been in that kind of realm for a while?
I've been in the industry pretty much my whole life.
Oh, okay.
I bounced around, did a few other things, but it's mainly been commercial real estate development. And this company's been around for 2.5 years, and I've been there for a year and a couple months.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And this is on the finance side you've been involved in for the most part. You're not actually doing any selling of the houses and stuff like that yourself?
Right.
Well, you say commercial, actually. Sorry, so I guess it'd be not houses as much as the buildings and et cetera.
Right. Like the apartment buildings. And what's really cool is we do it with modular manufacturing. So we build the stuff in the factory, and then we put it together on site. And that's one of the things that really has kind of made us different, is that we can put together housing in a very short period of time, build it up very quickly, and that's a game changer. So I'm excited because you know what? I mean, I just keep reading about how housing is so difficult out here, and this will potentially shift that back to where you'd want to actually live in SoCal.
Right. No, that's certainly something I've heard of before. And actually, Becky and I are in the process of saving and trying to do that whole kind of program. And we've heard of some people leaving California because of how bloody expensive it is to live here, and to purchase a home. I look at some of the homes that are up there, and I'm looking at this house, whatever it's $450,000, whatever. I think about what that would be back home in Canby, Oregon. And it's like that might be like $200,000+ less, $250,000 less. We hear about people
crazy.
Or like 8 more bedrooms and 5 cows included with it.
Yeah, exactly.
A fresh
free barn.
Exactly.
Here's 17 acres. Yeah,
10-car garage.
exactly. Yeah. But and then there's the other side too, where people will leave California, sell whatever they have here, and it goes miles down the road in other places. So
Yeah, they'll buy a mansion with a go-kart track
Yeah.
in the backyard.
not a bad idea. I'm sure everybody would want that across the board.
Definitely a tough line being in California, because from what I hear when people leave is that there really isn't no place like it. But because of that, I think California is pretty smart. Like, we can raise the rent on this bitch.
Jeez Louise.
And make it worthwhile for the state, but it sucks.
It
for
seems that
everyone
way.
else.
Yeah. We've I've been pretty much the same complex in a while, and it seems like it goes up $80 to $100 every year.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
and it's not like the place is getting better.
Right. Yeah, it's actually getting worse.
It's way-
probably.
yeah. Well, I'm living there, so it's already deteriorating in value. Moving on from what you do on the 9 to 5. How did you get into? You say you almost always been doing that, but did you get right out of school, or like you've been right out of school into finance basically, or did you go to school for that, etc.?
I actually did. So my major at USC was international finance, which is kind of a really silly major to have because you're being taught things that you can't do straight out of school. So it was kind of useless in that regard, but it still had finance in it. So I graduated at a time when it was difficult to find a job. It was back in '89, and so there was no finance jobs. There was no anything related. So I actually did. I worked for a freight forwarding company.
Okay.
Doing air freight. They had a unique business where we would ship like violins and like, I don't know, what's the other thing that they would like bacteria and weird stuff, like stuff that nobody would handle, lighter fluids. It was really, so we'd put that on airplanes and make sure it got to the other side. And
How did you figure that? Or like just an ad or whatever? Or?
Yeah, I think it was more out of desperateness. You know? I just said, oh, well, let's see.
It's a paycheck.
Paycheck. Let's go sign up for that. But it was, I guess, the international part of it that I thought it would be interesting, but it had nothing to do with that.
Yeah. So you went for school for international finance, thinking finance. All right, this is gonna be, and it was actually the international part that got you dialed in.
Yeah.
Oh, this Diego Morales, he sounds worldly.
You get there like, so what's the job? Like, you take these boxes, you put on that pallet
on the forklift. Literally,
Exactly.
I became an
no
expert
way.
forklift driver at that company.
There's another great job that allows you to do that. It's called CalSpeed Karting, and you got plenty of forklift driving for you to do around here.
Bi-weekly. How'd you go from doing the forklift driving expertly to actually getting into the finance game?
So after that company, and probably 6 months into it, I was already looking for something else. I'm like, I don't want to do this. And then the next gig I got, which was working for a mini blind manufacturer in LA that actually was located underneath the freeway. The 10 freeway was above us, and nobody knows like that building that exists there that I'm talking about. And then I was doing collections, accounts receivable.
Ah, okay.
Getting people to pay their bills, and that's somewhat accounting related, right? And then I was looking for another job, and then finally I got my break, and that's when I started working for my first commercial real estate company, and it was Trammell Crow, so they're very large in Texas, and I worked in the city of Commerce, and they basically ran most of the industrial buildings. They did the property management, we did the maintenance, and I worked in kind of a tenant, I forget what it was called, tenant coordination group. And that gave me my break. So the next job that I had about a year and a half later was for Heinz Interest Limited Partnership. They're also based in Texas, and that's when I was doing construction accounting. That was my first sort of numbers, like spreadsheets and that kind of stuff. And
how old were you roughly at that time?
So that would have been 24, 25.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're rolling at that point. So since then, you've pretty much been in that game for the most part.
Right.
It's been fairly steady as far as what you were trying to do.
Yeah.
And that's allowed you to go racing from time to time.
Yeah, I always tell everybody, I go, I do that so I can go racing.
Right.
The reality is my head has always been focused on racing, and that's just, what I have to do. But yeah. And I've tried several times to sort of marry what I did with motorsports, and it hasn't quite worked out. It's kind of difficult to crack into that. So who knows? Maybe one day.
Well, actually, if you were to crack in, you'd probably make less than you do now. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's the fear, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Forklift driver for an IndyCar team. You're like, you're loading up the chassis and everything.
Full circle.
Yeah. He's like, I can get into this.
So you go and you're doing this work so you can go racing and whatnot, and obviously not able to work in the industry is one thing. But how did you? Did you? How long have you been racing? You've been racing just in your adult life as you started working, or were you able to start doing it when you were a kid?
I did it when I was a kid. I was fortunate that things started when I was actually really, really little. And the oldest story that I have about racing that kind of brings it all together for me is when I lived in Connecticut. I was in Danbury, Connecticut. And we lived close to a lake, and next to that lake was this really cool cul-de-sac that ended up in a hill. And so we always looked at that hill and said, we could ride bikes on it, skateboards, whatever. And box carts, right? That's always that's kids.
Like a soapbox derby kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just kind of, make something out of wood and find the little tires that go on it and, put a rope for a steering wheel and that type of stuff. And
right.
So that was already kind of brewing in me, and I don't know exactly how that got started. It must have been probably just the local, neighborhood kids, and we'd all just talk about what we could do. We were always building stuff. That was one thing about that neighborhood that was so cool. Is we were like 10 kids, scruffy kids that would just go out and build dams in the rivers and try and build a fort in the tree and that type of stuff.
Cool.
So I
Love
think,
it.
we kind of wanted to do it with, the cart. And so I forget exactly how we stumbled upon it, but somebody found one that was kind of old and beat up and hadn't been completed. So we just kind of brought it over my garage and we started tinkering with it, and we got it to where it actually kind of rolled and worked, but we hadn't tested it out yet. And one day we're having dinner with my family, and somebody's knocking on the door. And my parents are like, "Who's that?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Let's go find out." And then they're like, "Hey, the kids, they want to race you." I'm like, "Where?" She goes, "Up on the hill. They have another cart. You got to bring your cart." And so I'm like, "Okay, we got to bail on dinner because this is like big time."
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, how old were you?
I'm estimating that to be around 9.
9?
Yeah.
And you were the one calling the shots in dinner time. Yeah, your parents like, oh, for sure.
was
Dinner's
the-
done, you
was
guys.
the
Maybe that
talent.
was a little different.
We got to put this in the Tupperware. We got to go.
Yeah. It was probably more like do all your chores, everything, and then
Yeah.
maybe we're gonna let
we'll
you out.
schedule it this weekend.
Right.
So anyway, sorry, you're gonna go meet up the kids here and go
Yeah.
racing.
So like there was like imagine like me and my brother, and then like I don't know, just like 3 other kids that were on our side of the neighborhood, and then there were these like 6 or 7 kids that were on the other side. And it was like one of those like literally
Hollywood movies,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it was, because I remember this vividly, like the whole staring you down
Right.
as you're walking up the hill, and everyone kind of screaming like how the rules should be. And I'm like thinking, we haven't even tested this thing out
Yeah.
yet. Like how's this going to work? But somehow we all sorted it out. And I guess the other thing I'll mention is, I wasn't necessarily going to be the driver, right? We were just working on the cart, but that last minute thing, I was like, no, I'll take this. I think I got this. And we go up to the top of the hill, and then it's kind of fuzzy. I don't really remember much, but they let us go. And this guy who had a different kind of box cart, his was had more like bumper stuff on it, where mine, the wheels were exposed, and it was just more like a 2x4 that swung back and forth. And I remember it had a little bit of carpeting in the seat, it was kind of weird, but
Stylish.
yeah. We're going down the hill, and he sees that I'm gaining a little bit. And so he comes over and immediately starts plowing into me. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Okay, this is going to be the rough way we're going to do it. So I don't know. I guess I kind of remember this, that going over to the side to let him come over was kind of like what felt natural to me. And then when he thought he had already pushed me over and started going this way, I plowed back into him at that point, caught him off guard, and he goes spinning off into the side of the road, smashing, crashing, and I make it down the road and glory on my first, and
Got your first podium.
First
win.
podium.
Yeah.
And the neighborhood kids are all screaming and yelling, and the other ones are all upset and saying they cheated and blah blah blah. And it was one of those things. And then that was it. Like that cart, it like mine broke even after that, and then we never fixed it. And then I didn't do anything.
So you've achieved your glory. What?
Retirement.
The
retired,
international soapbox derby champion of whatever street that was.
Was it a paved hill or a dirt hill?
It was a paved hill.
Okay.
The very top of it was dirt, because I remember we used to go up with our bikes up there and put ramps and jump off of it and kind of, and then go all the way down the hill as fast as you could. But it was just that real like Hollywood type style where there was no cars on that road ever. We used to dominate the streets, play football and hockey, and then, little box karting.
That's awesome. And you said this is Connecticut and you're 9. Were you born there in Connecticut?
No, so I grew up on the East Coast, but I was actually born in Colombia
Okay.
in South America. And
I thought there was a Colombian thing there, and there's also a Brazilian thing there somewhere. I want
There
to get
is.
to that too. So you were born in Colombia, and for how long did you live there?
so my parents got married. A year later had me, and 10 months later had my brother. And then 3 months after that, we were all packing our bags and coming here to the States. My dad and my mom both had spent time in the U.S. Doing exchange programs. And my mom, I think she went to a boarding school up here. And so they both really wanted to come to the States. And as soon as my dad could find a way, he packed us up and off we went, and we arrived in Queens, New York, and lived there for a year. I mean, I don't remember any of this. And we moved to New Jersey. I kind of remember that because we had a lot of fun playing around in the parks and stuff there. And then we went to Connecticut, and first place we stayed was Stamford, Connecticut, and then we moved to Danbury, and then we eventually moved to another city. But those were like those kids growing up moments, on the East Coast where you have snowstorms, in the winter with sledding and all that stuff. And then the summer is hot and you're trying to cool off. And,
right.
So you're 9 years old, you do the soapbox thing.
Mm-hmm.
When do you end up getting back into racing? Like, I should say getting back. I mean, you had this racing experience. You actually haven't gotten into racing proper yet. So,
right.
So when does that happen?
So when I was 12... and we were living back in Stamford, I think. My dad actually, at the time, he worked for Philip Morris. So that was, at the time, they had their racing division, which was Marlboro, and they were very much into James Hunt, who was their primary sponsor back in those years. And he would actually get invited to go to the Formula One races when he was working abroad. He was actually traveling in Europe, and so he'd get to go those. And we never got to go, but we'd hear about him. And then my dad said, "Hey, we got tickets to go to Watkins Glen."
Oh, sweet!
And as kids, we're like, "What's that?"
Yeah, not too far away from Connecticut, then, right?
Right. Yep,
They're
not too far away. But I mean, we were so young; we were just being dragged along.
Yeah,
literally no clue what we're actually going to get into. And but it ended up being the penultimate round of the 1976 Formula One season, where James Hunt is, the Niki Lauda story that year, that same exact year, which is so meaningful now, right? Like, to me, I mean, I'm blown away that was the first thing that I saw. And because my dad worked for the company, we actually were on the top boxes, the Marlboro boxes above the Formula One cars in Watkins Glen in 1976. Wow. So if you can imagine, as a 12-year-old, I'm barely peering over the little fence or thing that they had, and those wicked loud cars are being fired up below us. And I think that must have been it, man, because the sensation that I had was, I remember just being so vividly enamored with everything that was going on. The pomp and circumstances of all the decorations of this crowd of people screaming and yelling for cars that just were racing by. And I mean, how could you not, right?
The excitement from the stands and what the track's bringing. It's kind of it's
that first touch point, right?
Yeah.
Like, if that's what you saw for the first time, you've never seen anything.
Especially at that era of racing. I mean,
and the pinnacle of racing at the time too.
Exactly. I mean, you still get that at races, but that was such a different time period for motorsports,
It was.
So that's awesome to experience that.
Right. And I mean, my memories of it are not what you see, what Hollywood had. Like, by watching the movies is what I'm like, oh, that's what it must have been like, right? All I remember were little bits and pieces of things that were kind of distant memories. But for my dad, it was exciting because he had actually bet up in the pool, like, as to, I think they were specific as to whether James Hunt would win the race was one bet, but then it was more like when he would actually win it and all that stuff. So apparently James Hunt passed Jody Scheckter, which was driving that totally famous six-wheeler Formula One car. Mm-hmm. I don't remember that, but that was there. And he did it like with 7 or 6 laps to go and won the race. And my dad ended up winning the big pool that day. So he was going nuts. And, I think all of that too, right?
Just adds to it.
Yeah, yeah. So I have to say that it must have been that sparked everything. Mm-hmm. The other story is a little bit more just a coincidence that happened.
Gotcha.
But that one, because later on in life, it was almost like everything that I saw was a car that I wanted to draw. Or how can I understand about engines? Or it was all this stuff coming at me when I was a kid and just being curious. And I just said that there's something drawing me there. I really want to try and do something with that. But it wasn't like I went and go, hey, I want to go racing. That happened later.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Gotcha. So you're 12 and you have this incredible experience, which is, top of the box. And we're like, that's bitching. Where do you actually start getting behind the wheel again?
Okay. So shortly thereafter, about a year and a half after that, we moved to Brazil. And so there's the Brazilian component.
Got it.
My dad worked for Xerox. So he had left Philip Morris, worked for Xerox, and they gave him a great opportunity to take the family down there and then be working in the Latin American group there. So as kids, we go off and we're in a, for us, it was a foreign world with a language we didn't understand. And just imagine Connecticut to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, like the two most polar opposite places, back in the late 70s.
Well, and you're right in the high school years too.
No, I was younger. I was so. Or am I confusing things? I think I'm confusing it.
Were you 12 at the F1 race? I think
I was 12 when we went to Brazil. I was 9 at the F1 race, and I must have been younger for the other story.
Okay. Got it.
Think about it. That makes more sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway,
so this is what we have to look. We will look forward to this, right? He lived it. He can't remember the bloody thing. Okay, so all right, we're 12, and we're in Brazil. We've had this memory and all this other kinds of crazy stuff. So you're not quite middle school, age, and you're in Brazil, which just that baffles my mind. That's crazy how that would happen. And so you're in Brazil, and how does it go from there?
So my brother was always into sports like soccer and running and things like that. I never really gravitated towards any of that. I mean, I kind of played, but I was just never took any of that seriously. I was more into like studying. And so my parents were constantly trying to find something for me to do and maybe to get me out of the house at that point.
I was going to say, yeah.
And so this kid posted a sign up on our school. It was the American school. I went to the American school there. So it was all American students and students from all over. It was a really cool school, by the way, because of that, because we had, you had your schoolmates were from everywhere. And then it was just this sign. I remember I said, anybody want to come with me to go try go-karts? Please reach out to me, blah, blah, blah. And he was 1 grade younger than me. And I'm like, go-karts? Yeah, let's go do that. So I didn't know him. I just found him. And then I said, what is this? What's it all about? And he goes, yeah, my dad and I were going to go the next weekend. And so I just wanted to bring somebody along. And I'm like, okay, let me ask my dad. So I ran home and I'm like, please, just let me. And
Did you know what a go-kart was at this point?
Not exactly. Not really.
But like racing, go-kart, something like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think back then, as a kid, you'd always look through catalogs for Christmas and stuff, and I'd always see the go-karts back then that were there, and I'm like, I want one of these, but yeah, right, you're not going to get one of those. So I figured it was something like that. Yeah, it's funny, Mike, you bring that up, because you're right, I did not really know what I was getting myself into. I just was so excited about the idea, and my parents were excited. They're like, hey, the kid likes something, let's go, right? So my dad secretly in the back of his mind was thinking, if he gets into it, maybe I could get into it.
Nice.
And so we went, and I mean, this story is also amazing. So back then, was one of the heydays for go-karting in Brazil and Rio. They used to race go-karts in a makeshift track that was located where the Formula One cars used to race in Rio. So it's called the Autódromo de Jacarepaguá. And so it's about an hour and a half drive from Rio, and it's in the middle of, back then it was kind of more of a jungle, and there's like a big lagoon next to it. And you'd go into this big, I mean, this is where Formula One races, right? So it's like here, it's like going to CalSpeed. You have the different gates, and so you'd go to gate 6, and you'd have to go through the back, and then you'd see some of the circuit, and you'd see the grandstands and everything, kind of the same feel. Yeah. And I hadn't ever been there, so I didn't even know what that was like. I was just so blown away. I'm like, we're racing here? Wow, that's cool. And as we pull in, it's a long entrance to get to where you finally start seeing the go-karts, because they actually race them on the pits. The cold pit and the hot pit is our runway, and then they use the entrance back into the pits as sort of the corner to go around. And so it's like a break in the concrete to do a loop, massive straightaway, and I could hear the carts as we're driving in. I'm like anxious, looking out the window to just get the first taste. And all of a sudden I hear this. And I'm like, whoa, we're going to drive that? And we're talking, this is the era of direct drive go-karts, 125cc, 100cc lightweight carts.
I'm sorry, yearish?
So this is
80?
80, probably 7980
Okay.
or 8081 around there.
All right.
They had the smallest sprocket because at that track it was all about high speed. So I never knew really how fast we were topping out at, but at that point it must have been as fast as those karts could go. And the idea that they had was long straightaways with chicanes with tires. These tall banded tires that would form the chicane that you had to go through as fast as possible. And so there was one at the end of each of the straightaways. And my guess is you were like 90 miles an hour and you had to like flick it to go through it. And if you didn't make it, it was
spectacular. So you're on your way in, you're hearing these cars go by and whatnot. And you first see the guy. Explain that whole experience there as you pull up.
As I'm driving in, I mean, it was that terror excitement feeling, you know, at the same time, like I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, oh my God, I'm going to drive that, you know? And at the same time, it was like, oh, I can hardly wait to taste something, you know, just to feel what that's going to be like. And my dad was excited. I remember that. And we walk up. The guy that had invited us to go had a look of terrified, you know, in his face.
So you guys are trying it out. It wasn't his cart.
No. This was just random. We're going to show up and see what it's like to get in there and talk to the people and find out, like, how do you even get into this?
Okay.
So we hadn't talked to anybody. They just said, this is an open test date type of thing.
It was literally a come try out karting, come see what karting's all about. Yep. Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and so the two dads, they go off and trying to find somebody that's like the main person there and say, hey, my kids, you know, and oh, great, you know, here, come on. And so we have a cart that you could maybe, you know, to see if the kids fit. And they're starting to ask questions about like, how do you do it? Can we rent? Can we buy? And all this other stuff. And then finally they're like, all right, kids, hop on in, you know, and the pedals were a little bit far away and the cart felt big to me at the time. And then, you know, the thing is also you don't realize how they start these things, right? Mm-hmm. Back then, you know, they lift them up at the back and you run for a while and they hit the ground and you get the thing going. And as a kid, not knowing or having driven anything, understanding the basics of just simple accelerator, brake, engine, steering, the whole 9 yards had to happen in a few seconds, right?
Right.
I've never done it before, so
you're going now.
yeah, like it's too late. This is going to happen whether you like it or not. But as soon as the cart hits the ground, and if you have your foot slightly on the gas, it goes, it jumps, right? And that's when you can understand for the first time the power that it has. And I remember that first jump, and then immediately getting off, and then go, wait a minute, I want more of that. And then I stepped on it again, and just feeling that incredible, like, chain connected to piston acceleration that cart has. And all they let us do is drive around the parking lot, because when you looked at it, it was too daunting even to think that you could possibly go out and do what those guys are doing, right? Let alone never having driven anything. And so we did a few laps. The other kid didn't really want to spend time doing it. I could just tell he was not having a good time. He was so freaked out by it. I was busy, really, my curiosity took over, so I started staring at, like, I don't know, the throttle cable, the brake, the little knuckle for the, you know, the wheel.
Spindle and whatnot.
Yeah, like, you know, just enamored with the fact that, how does that work? How, you know, and I wasn't paying attention, and I just drove right into the catch fence, because I was literally not looking where I was going. And I wasn't going very fast.
Dad's like, back it up.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a bad idea.
Oh, this is horrible.
Up until you went to that track, I mean, your first experience is really Watkins Glen. Were you watching racing on TV at all, or was it a family thing?
I don't remember. I have to say that we probably weren't. And that's what's ironic, because I don't remember anything that would have stood out, like, because on TV back then was also a whole different thing.
For sure, yeah.
You had to be there at the right time with the right channel clicker thing to get to the right, you know, broadcast. And then I was in Brazil, so they weren't very advanced with their television broadcasts. It wasn't like the NBC Wide World of Sports that was going on, where you would be able to watch, I don't know, whatever was going on.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah. So no, I'd have to say that it was very much all foreign to me, like completely new and just a world to explore.
And you're I mean, your dad wasn't a big fan of racing. He just happened he had that partnership. That was how he got the tickets, right? So
yeah.
Yeah.
And that was for Philip Morris, and now he worked for a different company.
Right. Yeah.
But the conversations after that on the way home, I kind of remember my dad just feeling very excited about the fact that I was interested, and he and my mom and my dad were talking about, wonder how we could do this.
And how's mom feel about the catch fence?
Oh, she
actually. How did you feel after the catch fence?
Priorities.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'll tell you a different story. And I don't remember the timing of this, but there's two catch fence stories to begin with. When we used to visit my cousins in Florida, I have two cousins, Jaime and Dario, and they were very much into like bikes and motorbikes. So they had one of those old style motorbikes with the big fat seat and the big knobby tires.
Right.
And when I was old enough, I remember visiting their house, and they had it in the backyard, and they're like, yeah, I think he's old enough to try and ride it. I'm like, okay. So, they kind of show me, again, the whole concept of, like, throttle brake, completely foreign to me. And so, and this is not a big backyard. It's a very small backyard with a chain link fence around. It's just basically meant for me to kind of go around a little bit.
It actually sounds like a setup for you to go right into it.
That's exactly. And I mean, nowadays, I guess it would be a YouTube moment, right? Here's that little silly kid with his moped. And so we got it going. And my brain didn't register how to back off on the throttle.
Whiskey throttled it.
It just, exactly, like the more, and I thinking, wait, more? And I'm like, no, brake. So I lost control of it, and the bike went flying into the catch fence. I flew off of it at the last second to not get hurt, and so those are my first two. First time on a bike, first time on a go-kart, catch fence.
Gotcha.
Great, right?
Yeah,
I'm wondering, bright future for a guy.
Yeah, I'm thinking if you at some point in this conversation, you're going to talk to us about the first time you were in a car, and it's going to be some kind of tire wall or something like that. Well, let's go back to what you were saying.
We're not there yet, so one step at a time.
That's right, one thing at a time.
One disaster at a time.
Yeah, this is little Diego still. Wait till the elder gets going. But so you guys are so it sounds like mom and dad, the incident and like that. It's less about, maybe I assume you weren't going as fast at the time and things like that. So it was like, okay, kid's not hurt, everything's all good.
Maybe we can get him to focus on looking forward instead of
we'll give it another shot kind of thing. And to your point, you are in Brazil, and so I mean you've got football or racing,
right?
And the younger kid wants to do football, and well, we got something for the older kid. So you leave there from your first experience. Sounds like it went well enough for there to be a second.
Exactly.
And how did that go? And what was the second experience?
So the second experience was going back to the track, and they're going to outfit me in a cart that my dad had bought used. And he had somehow...
So you guys leave that going, we're going to try karting, basically.
Basically.
Okay.
Yep. It was no longer an if, it was going to be when. And my dad was, I could tell, pretty gung-ho about just being able to hang out there and watch the whole thing and, maybe see if I was going to catch on with this, right? And
again, you're 12-ish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I remember that go-kart was red. It was an older kart. It was back then, it used to be called the Kart Mini, was the go-karts that everyone drove. 125cc. There was no size difference for kids, so we would run the normal karts. Honestly, I don't really remember much about how it really, like the first day and how it all began. It must have been not very good. Like, I don't remember good things about it.
Maybe you didn't crash, and that's why it doesn't stick out.
Yeah.
10 flawless laps. I can't remember it. It evades me.
Not memorable.
But I think what must have happened is that we went there, and they, first of all, getting a helmet on my head, and like, all right, helmet's comfortable. Okay, now I got that, and gloves. I'm probably just raced in my normal clothes with a jacket and jeans, and then having to follow somebody around the track. And the thing that must have stood out for me back then was the crazy differential in speed. Because when you're trying to learn everything and you're doing it on a track where these guys are going 100 miles an hour, and they are amazing drivers back then. So the fields that we used to have are like 100 plus people would show up for a weekend of racing. And I know I did not do that right away because it was too daunting. It was like more like schooling, just lead follow until I got up to speed.
Is this on that same track you were talking about before?
Yes.
With the chicanes and everything? Okay, wow.
Same track with the chicanes and the crazy high speeds. And you know, the category that I would have started with is called Quarta Categoria Menor, which is just the junior category. It's for kids up to 14.
Okay.
And then usually that meant between 10 and 14, because if you were younger, you wouldn't fit in the cart. So it was a very narrow range. But there were about, I don't know, like maybe 16 of us, you know. And, you know, when you first kind of being introduced to the group, you know, all the other kids are like, oh, hey, there's the new guy, you know, and stuff. And so very friendly, except for 2 of them. And they're just excited to have another guy, you know.
Right.
And I was excited to meet them, and you know, we'd probably kick the ball around while we're waiting for the races to start and things like that. That I do remember. But what stood out for me is that first year, which we only probably did a few races that were left in that season, is starting in a race, watching everybody just go away, and I would be in dead last and finish dead last or second to dead last because someone spun out every round that race, and just kept thinking, I gotta get better at this. It's gotta get better, you know. And my dad was very like encouraging, and everybody was very like, you know, I mean, the Brazilians were just like warm and wanted me to keep at it, right? Like, don't give up. And I'm like, you know, and I was not like afraid of that. I was just more like, why can't I go faster, right? Like, what's not there? What's not clicking?
Right.
And then for my birthday, so this is like probably started in the beginning of the year, towards December, my dad gave me a brand new cart for my birthday because I had just gotten to the point where now I was keeping up with the pack. I was in the back, but I was actually, so he thought.
They weren't going off in the distance anymore. The tow hooks are out.
Exactly. I'm starting to get things, starting to understand, but you know, and he just thought, okay, maybe he just needs a new go-kart. And I think the other reason why is because then he took over the other cart and started racing himself.
Nice.
That's pretty cool.
So now it became more of a family thing.
Right.
Now we're starting to go there on a regular basis. It became this outing. My brother was kind of into it, and it was just a place where we were making friends, and it was just a thing to do and a fun thing. And that was the first season, and then things didn't really click for quite a while. Like
So you get the new cart, and
Yep.
and you're running the new cart, and he's running the old cart, and it's still like you're still hanging out at the back of the pack.
Yep.
So it wasn't the go kart.
Nope.
All right. Well, how's Dad doing in the other one?
He's having a blast, but he's just in the back too.
Yeah.
He's driving. He's like, maybe it wasn't the go-kart.
Maybe we should swap.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. I'm sure he thought about that. But his group was called Novato, which is basically as long as you're older than 14 and you've never done this before or something like that, you're in that group. So it's
Right.
the catch-all group. And
Got
it
it.
is the biggest field. I mean, they had like 40 cars or something crazy like that.
wow.
And it was nuts because the differential between the last place guy and the first place guy was massive, and lots of carnage and accidents. And so that's the group he was in.
Was your mom stoked that he decided to do it?
No. But it was a foregone conclusion at that point. This is what we're doing, you know.
Yeah.
But she learned how to deal with the anxiety, I think. I think that was very nerve-wracking probably for her.
And honestly, that's every mom when they
Yeah.
first see their kid or the husband, whatever, get in the cart. It's a few deep breaths,
here
you know,
we
when they
go.
first go out.
Probably doesn't go away at all.
No,
Not
just-
a bunch.
Nope,
yeah,
not
less,
a lot.
Less breathing.
So you guys are both running, and let's just say you're not setting the world on fire.
Nope. Starting to doubt, why is it? that,
Yeah,
you know?
and you're kind of moving past the I'm driving stuff and I'm having a good time to I am really starting to want, like, I'm not getting any better.
Yeah.
How does it go from there to, obviously you are not too shabby now, so what happens next?
So that back then they had like there were these groups of teams, kind of, I guess you could call them, or they were just loosely associated groups that would all get together and then they would all help each other. And so it was almost like a rivalry. And then one side of the house was this guy named Sergio Caula, which we were originally in his camp. And then the other side of the house was we used to call him Tio Edu, Uncle Edu. And we were spending a lot of money, and the carts were breaking a lot when we were doing it over on this side. And then they came over to us, and they're like, hey, if you want to kind of come over here, we might have a better program for you. And we switched houses, and I guess that's the way to put it. And that was right around the time that I got the new cart. And they just had the most amazing, like, welcome mentorship program a kid could ever ask for, because they were just really good people. And I'll never forget that guy, Chiwedu. He would say, okay, you really want to get this? All right, this is what we're going to do. Forget the racing. Come on in. We're going to have you fit the cart for a whole day. We're like, okay. And we're going to have you learn how to wrench on the cart for a whole day. Okay. And it was just like, okay, this is the part of racing that we haven't had yet. They just threw us out there and never really said anything about what you needed to do it right. And so he had a really soft voice, and he was also like a black belt. And I remember he had a lot of things to say about the connection between really being prepared to go racing versus the actual driving and all that, the mental stuff. So he would get the kids together, and we would go there, and we would spend a whole day, and it was literally a whole day about just testing out how you're sitting in the cart, like no driving, just seat position. And I remember going, how unbelievably comfortable I was afterwards when we got through that whole process. I'm like, wow, you can actually really be ready to do what you need to do. Okay, now let's figure out all the pedals, and let's start talking about the dynamics of a go-kart. And so I started to realize it was the lack of that curiosity that I already had in me to be satisfied with knowing everything about the kart, every single thing. They said, this is what it's going to take. And so I just dove into that curiosity aspect. I wanted to take the whole thing apart, put it back together so I could understand how it worked. I wanted to talk to the people who were in that camp and find out what they were doing. Why were they able to be faster? And it took about a month. And then like 2 times in the track. And I tell you guys, something clicked. It was a day. It was literally like the light bulb went off. And all of a sudden, that G-force side control, understanding the go-kart, just went off.
You just had to get the information, it sounds like, too.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you first got your cart and you were racing, there was no more instruction, really, huh? It was just show up and drive.
Show up and drive. Yeah. And it was so daunting, right? No one was even, saying, hey,
you should maybe look at that. Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
So...
but the other side of it too is at that time, that camp, they were going through an expansion stage, and so a lot of people were coming in and they were leaving that other camp, and it was just a very big difference in how they ran things. They ended up building out this whole area where they would store the carts so you could keep all your stuff there, which was not available from the other place, and it just made it feel like it was a place to go hang out. Mm. And it became like escolinha, which means little school. So we would just go hang out at the little school, and you could spend time and just, test out different things and figure stuff out. Then the go-kart tracks changed. We no longer were racing at that place. And I forget what year, 1981, I think they moved to the track called the Makimunji. And that was a purpose-built go-kart track just for Rio that had actually been the original track, and the owners had kind of let it get run down. So the tall grass was there, it was kind of beat up. And then they said, no, we're going to go back there. We're going to clean this place up. And the new owners had a lot of money, and they transformed that place into one of the most amazing go-kart tracks. It was really fun. Just like they did all the new curbing. It was a multi-layout, multi-configurational track. It had grandstands on the main straightaway. They installed a start light, and the configurations they had there allowed for there to be like this massive straightaway in one section, and then really technical, like super technical to get back to the front straightaway. And that's where my light bulb went off at that location.
You just talked about somebody or people, the new owners, putting a lot of money into this other track, and I'm just thinking about the time period here. Mm-hmm. I want to say, God, and I hate that I can't remember off the top of my head. Maybe you can. I want to say it's like late 70s that Senna ends up he's going for he's running the world championship and stuff like that in karts. Am I wrong or
Yep.
right on that?
No, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
So he does that, and then he gets into F1 in the early '80s, right? Mid '80s.
Formula Ford. When I saw, so I'll mention this. Senna appeared at that go-kart track that I'm telling you about for what was called the 5 Hours of Rio. And it was an event that was a one-off, and it was team racing for 5 hours. 5 hours or 3 hours, I'm not exactly sure, but one of those two. And it was a team of 3 people. And he had gone to Formula Ford in Europe and was doing that thing, and had come back in the off-season, and he was doing this race.
Gotcha.
Little known name, Ayrton da Silva, black suit, leather suit with the yellow helmet. But, back then we had Renato Russo, Carcassi. We had all these guys that were legendary Brazilian go-karters.
Okay.
So it really wasn't like that guy was amazing. It was all these guys were amazing. We just had never seen that guy.
Okay. So I guess where my question was, and you just kind of answered it, Senna wasn't Senna yet.
Nope.
He was just another Brazilian racing go-karts over in Europe and doing fairly well, obviously, but then going on. He's just another Brazilian moving his way up through the field.
Moving his way up through the ranks.
So his success or moving through had absolutely no bearing on whether or not it was going to help build up Brazilian karting or everybody. The interest was already there, and it was already happening.
It was a heyday. It was because of that new go-kart track and the infusion and the people just getting into it, and the economy was doing really well back then too, so a lot of people could afford it. And so, I mean, it was just a lot of there were a lot of tracks around the country. So if you were doing it seriously, you could go and race in Manaus,
like a
and
national championship.
Exactly. They even had the Pan American Championship back then. So like people from Argentina would come over, and Uruguay and Paraguay, and so you get the best of the best, and you'd get to see some of those guys practice at the tracks. But you're right. Senna was just another driver that was good, and personally for me, my experience with him, and this goes, this is going to speak to why he's my idol and hero, is that at that race, the unfortunate thing that I had is I was not old enough to be in that race. I was 1 year too young. They didn't allow the junior category to race, and my birthday was coming up, and I was trying to convince them desperately, come on, man, let me in. I want to do this race, but my dad did. So my dad was on a team, and so I basically went there to help my dad, and I had a lot of downtime to just walk around the track and watch these guys go and do their thing. And I was, pissed off little kid, like, God damn it, I should be doing that. But what I would do is I'd go to the end of the front straightaway that I was mentioning, because that particular course configuration had a European style straightaway into a very sharp corner. Best thing to watch, right? Because it's direct drive. There's no clutch. It's just single disc brake. And these guys are going as fast as they can and then jamming on it, right? And I would watch them, and I'm like, oh, okay, I learned a few things. When Senna did it for the first time that I saw him coming by, I was like blown away, because everybody was braking within this area of about 3-4 feet. And this guy was braking 5 feet deeper into the corner, and the cart was almost completely out of control. And yet he would bring it in and make the corner. And I'm just sitting there going, how on earth can you have that cart control? That was just mind-blowing. And that I remember. That's significant, because I had no idea that I would connect that later on in life, realizing the star that he'd become, and that I witnessed that at that level. I just will never forget that. For me, I have this thing about I wish I could do what he did in that way at that moment. And I think that's what I always strive for. I want to do that cart control, that unbelievable, just phenomenal cart control.
You walk away from that moment, right? And you see that kind of deal, and then you end up having your birthday, and then the next season comes around. You kart again, and do you kind of just latch onto that? And as you say, things are clicking, getting a little bit better.
Maybe. I think it was less that. I think at that point I actually had gotten pretty good, and
good enough to understand what you were watching.
Exactly, like going, okay, it was a revelation, like, that there's this another level of skill that's beyond the best people that I know of, right? Like for me, the idols were already there, and this guy was breaking those barriers for me, and so it just was like, wow, okay, what is going on there? But again, because it was him and he wasn't famous, it was just
Another guy.
But it's stuck in my mind, right? And only years later do you ever realize who that is, right? Because I mean, he disappears, and unless you were really paying attention to other forms of racing, it's not for many years until he starts actually, and then Tolman and all stuff, and you still don't really know or connect, for me. And but for me personally, I guess in Brazilian go-karting at that point, the junior category, we were running faster. We were the second fastest times out there. Those kids at that point, the maturity of us, we had gotten to a point where we were almost on par with the fastest category, which was the 100cc and the 125cc Primera Categoria, whatever they used to call it. And so when we would go out there and qualify, and we would be laying out times that were just as fast as them, there was a weight thing too. I mean, that come into play.
Juniors are lighter for sure.
But there was a lot of respect for our group. So, and I my first year of real, where I finally learned how to really do it, I remember qualifying was a big deal. And I had a rivalry with another kid. And that for me, kind of sets in stone what I would recall as being the most learning I did in karting, also the biggest frustration, because I never finished any of my racing in Brazil having won a single race. And I finished second, 10 times. So there was this thing that I never satisfied. And that's another thing about that is I came out of that whole go-kart experience never having won, gotten so close so many times and being right there, but there was that need, I can't win.
Right.
Because at that point, then I realized, okay, I'm competitive. I should be able to at least have a shot at this, and it just never happened. But by doing so, I set myself up to a tremendous amount of frustration. And then that year, a lot of blown engines, by the way, which my dad used to hate me because that was the other thing I was very well known for is I would blow my motors. Back then you used to play with the carburetor, the high and the low and stuff, and I would just lean that guy out and at the end of those straightaways,
Man.
and race gone. That was part of the frustration too, is I blew a lot of motors, always got second place and never won. But that craving, that trying to understand what do I need to do in order to overcome that was very much in me when I finished that part of my racing. And I think that when I look back at those days, I remember that the one thing that I learned that I carry forward to today is those moments when I would be chasing my rival. I back then the karts had just one bumper metal piece, right? And then it had the little number plate on it. And if you were fast enough, you were actually slightly tucked underneath that thing. You were that close. And I loved that. For me, the ability to be that close to somebody and be ready to pounce was my obsession. My parents would often say, you don't have to drive that close to the other guy, that. And I'm like, no. For me, that's the thing is I want to, and so, and I would slide underneath that bumper sometimes and be right there. And I think that's something that's bring forth my Diego racing style anywhere, is that I obsessed with how can I be that close to somebody no matter what and be comfortable, relaxed, ready to trigger whatever kind of reaction I would need in order to be able to make a move. I learned that there. That was because of and the rivalry that I had with that one kid who was super phenomenal guy. It was this thing where it's either back and forth, him and me, and we used to hate each other on the track.
For sure, yeah.
Well, I think that's probably why you didn't win any races, mate, because you can't tuck yourself under a bumper if you're first.
Exactly.
It just didn't work out that way.
No, but hence the always being behind the bumper, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But it's humbling, right? I think that if you learn that you're always in the back, that you're going to be having these frustrations, if that happens early on in your career, you have a hunger for what you haven't gotten, but you learn how to deal with all those frustrations.
Right.
Time and time again, I'd either be on the side of the track with my dad, and I'm sitting there like blown engine. I was at a great race, or I didn't quite get the win, and that's what that was like.
That was it.
That was
It was
it.
one or the other, yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that you said you didn't actually win or like that in Brazil or whatnot. So I'm assuming there's an end to the career there. What happened after Brazil?
Well, wait. So there's one more quick thing that
Okay.
that I want to tie in. That it just came to me that I was, because I was second place so often, I actually was leading the championship. I forgot to mention that.
Nice.
Oh, that's kind of
Right?
important.
Because if you get second all the time, ultimately, if as long as first is not first all the time, you're going to be in first place. So I actually, before I left Brazil, I was leading the championship for my category, the junior category. And so that was really weird, right? You're frustrated, but you're also pretty good because you know that you're doing well.
Right.
Like I had gotten confident, but
no, hold on a second. You said before you left Brazil.
yeah,
Did you leave before the season ended?
I did.
Oh my good gosh!
Imagine that. So I departed from a championship that I had. We had about 2 more races left, and it was just because we're winding down the school year. My dad is moving back to the States. There's really not much we could do about it. Like that was more of a priority than what I was doing.
How long were you there for?
So let's see. From 4th grade. So it's like 5 years.
Okay.
But by the time that happened, now I actually went back to Brazil for my senior year in high school. It's kind of an interesting story. I went back to Connecticut and then back for my senior year, and then I graduated.
So not only do you not win,
Yeah.
and then have the other the frustrations of the motor and stuff like that, but you are leading the championship,
Yep.
and then have to leave.
Yeah.
Oh God, dang it!
Right?
That is rough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're this is as a junior still. You're okay. What 14, 15?
Yeah, I was
something like-
actually 14 at that point because I think I remember the next year I would jump up in the category. And so here's what's interesting. I'll say this. You know how we were talking about like who was important and who was my mentor back then, right? So that guy, Chiwedu, was very much a mentor, but there was a guy that was on our team. And I have to mention his name because he's very important, not only for me, but also in the Brazilian karting scene. Guga Ribas, or I forget what his nickname was. I think that's what his nickname was. And and so this guy he actually was, so like, how Senna always tried to become world champion and wasn't? He became world karting champion one year. It was a freak world championship that happened here in the U.S. It was something weird. You know how they always have the world championships, the FIA K1 world championship that's in Italy and it's been in other countries? It came to the States one year. He flew from Brazil, went there, and he won. So he's one of the few Brazilians that have actually won a world karting championship. That guy was in our house.
Oh wow!
And that's who I received mentorship from.
Oh, cool.
Like that kid, I say a kid because back then he was kind of a young man, I guess. He would jump into our karts and he would tune them. He's the guy that you would want to have him play with your carb to get it just right because he could hear the engine and he knew exactly how to tune it to make it perfect. And I have a little signed picture autograph from him and stuff. And the thing is, I would always watch him, and the one thing that I use to this day that he taught me is hand positioning on the steering wheel, like how critically important that was, because he's so relaxed. He drives that kart just so gingerly, like making those finite moves, but with his hands relaxed on the steering wheel instead of the death grip, or and also the positioning. So I remember distinctly thinking that that's something that I got to always, how like things you bring forward in life, that's one of the things that I bring forward is that seat position, hand position, and then the rest is more chess game and mental stuff. But yeah, that guy was amazing.
Yeah, the preparedness ahead of time, and then obviously the people around you and all those, especially in the early days of development, and absolutely you carry those things with you.
Right.
Obviously, Brazil, the karting in Brazil, your karting career there, those 3, 4, 5 years, however many it was, doesn't end the way you want it to. So you say you have to move back to Connecticut then.
Yep.
Do you go racing right away then when you get back?
So the thought was, and that's why it was kind of like, we'll continue this in the States. Let's bring the kart, bring all the stuff, and we'll just figure out what the equivalent category is over there. And, you go back to Connecticut, we arrived in the winter and you realize, oh, wait, nobody races during the winter. There's no racing, so we had to wait for the summertime. And we found a couple of local go-kart tracks, one of which was in New York, upstate New York, called Cuddybackville.
Heard of this one.
Yeah.
Apparently it's still around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, during the Terry Nash episode, and then again in Cleveland's, I think, they brought up Cuddybackville, and it was where the four-stroke Grand Nationals were, like 90s or something like that. So Cuddybackville.
Interesting.
Crazy
That's
that
pretty
happens.
cool.
What
to
a
pop up.
coincidence, man. Wow, that's wild. So for us, we just had looked it up and, we're like, hey, let's go and see what they're all about. So we packed up our stuff. And I say we, it was my dad, myself, and then one of the Brazilians that actually had been part of our group had gone up to Boston University, and him and his wife were up there, and they were just like, hey, if you guys ever go, we could go tag along. We're like, great. So off we go. Mind you, karting in the U.S. was clutch. There was no direct drive at that point, and it's an IKF circa 1982, 83, must have been, I think. And so there was no equivalent. There's no direct drive category. So they put me in the open category of whatever. And we arrive, and who's this? What is this? I've never seen this kart before, like all that stuff. And we made some friends. They received us really warmly there, I remember. But it was kind of like, still, you put on the helmet, you go racing, and it's all about, they want to beat you, right? And I remember going out there and just them almost causing my kart to stall out because they knew that they could go as slow as they possibly go before the start. And I couldn't. I was literally almost, the engine was about to die because they were going so slow. And then they dropped the green flag. They all go, and my kart's like, struggling. Spent the whole race trying to catch up with them, but I finished, I don't know, 5th or 6th. I did get a trophy, so it must have been 5th. And but it was really cool. Everybody was just super happy. We all had this fun time, and that was one of 2 races that I did in the States, and that's it. I didn't race anymore because of the way the winters worked, and the fact that then, school got in the way, and the weather was bad, and we just didn't have enough opportunities. My dad got busy with work. I couldn't do it by myself. And I think around that time is when I got my driver's license, and my interest started kind of waning about doing that.
Were you about 17 or so?
16.
Okay.
15 and a half to get the permit, and then 16
Gotcha.
back then. Interestingly enough, I'll segue back to one thing I did do is that when we moved back to Brazil, it happened to be a coincidence that there was the Brazilian national final race, which I had never done. And that's where, everybody gets together at one of the tracks, and it's a one-off, and it's to produce the national champion for that one-off race. It's not a championship series. So the best of the best come out to that. And I didn't own a go-kart in Brazil at the time. My dad said, do you want to do that race? And remember, I had never raced in any of the big adult categories. I'd always done the junior stuff, right? But I was old enough now.
So this is when you said you'd been in the States and you came back. This is during your senior year.
This is right slightly before, but yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And this is again for work, for Dad's work or something?
Yeah. Well, we were actually, we lived in Brazil. We enjoyed it. We moved back to Connecticut, and we all were kind of like, we miss Brazil. So
I was going to ask,
yeah. I mean, it's hard in high school to move countries, and now it's the opposite. I'm going from my Rio de Janeiro American School, Brazil, to Connecticut high school that kids have been there for their whole lives.
Right.
Everybody knows each other, and I'm the outsider, and it was just very awkward.
And the weather's pretty much identical.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So you end up going back. So the family liked it and just decided we all want to go back to Brazil anyway?
Yep.
Got it. So it's less about work and more about we like it there.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, we enjoyed we had friends and everything there too.
Gotcha.
So. But anyway, my dad said, if you want, I might be able to borrow a kart and you can go participate in this race. And I hadn't raced in a while, and I'm like, oh, I missed that. Let's do it, So that guy, Guga Ribas, the world championship guy, I drove his kart.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
So definitely not a bad kart.
Right.
And it was at a different track. So now, think about it. Fast forward, the go-kart track went back to being at that big Formula One race.
Okay.
But it was a purpose-built track on the side of it.
Oh.
Literally kind of like this configuration here at CalSpeed, where the big track's there and you have your purpose-built go-kart track out here. Fascinating layout, like amazing, really cool place. And I had very little time to familiarize myself with the track, to get familiar with the kart. And Google was racing too, and he wanted to do well. So everybody's, they're working on his kart. They're just like, yeah, here you go,
Sure.
Right.
And so we tried the best we could. Kart was doing great. My times weren't too bad. And qualifying, break the chain or the sprocket or something like that. I didn't get to qualify. Start dead last. And I'm like, really?
Man,
give me a break. And I was like 46 karts in that category. Now I'll mention the guy who won, Christian Fittipaldi, which we knew who he became later on. But at the time, his name was very famous in Brazil, but he was the nephew of the famous guy.
Emerson.
And he was a star, but he was a kid. And so it was...
He was a star because the last name's Fittipaldi.
Exactly.
Right,
yeah.
He's a pretty good karter.
Right. Pretty good karter. Or other famous names in that race, but his stood out, and he qualified fourth. So it didn't matter much to me. I wanted to win the thing, but I just figured, okay, let me see where he ends up. They sorted that kart. I think they felt bad for me that the thing broke. They sorted that kart out for me, so when it came to race time, I had the rocket. Like, that kart was, immaculately prepared. I just felt so comfortable in it, to the point where, we went down the straight to start, and I must have passed like 5 or 6 people in the first 2 corners. And I just felt so great. I'm like, okay, I'm back. I'm like, I can, really maybe make something out of this. And I just drove the wheels out of that kart and slowly kept chipping away. Spun out, believe it or not. This is direct drive. Spun out where you have to get out, do your own thing to somehow lift up the kart, kick it, and get going. And I was so exhausted by the time I spun out. I had enough energy for that one attempt. I knew that I couldn't just keep doing it, because if it wasn't going to start, I was just too dead. Got it going again. Got passed by like 2 or 3 people, repassed them. Everything's going crazy. Finally finished, and I ended up in 6th.
Wow.
From 46 to 6 in the national race, and Christian Fittipaldi won. And I always tell everybody, I go, imagine if I had qualified where I should have qualified.
Right.
Like, I could have done maybe podiumed or something. So that's another cool, that happened as a freak event. But it really, what it cemented for me is like riding a bike. I hadn't forgotten how to do it. I still was competitive. And there was something about, how like time goes by and you wonder,
what if?
Yeah. Do you still have it or not?
Yeah.
And it cemented that for me too. So I knew that, okay, I'm going to do this some point down the road, and so anyway, but then literally I didn't drive a kart for decades after that. Yeah.
So you go, and so you move a couple of races. There's obviously not a lot of racing going on. You guys go back to Brazil. Mm-hmm. You finish out, this is before senior year. You end up going and doing this race.
Do this one race.
And then you finish out school. And then ... you just stop racing?
Stop racing. And the reason why I stopped racing is I made a decision. My dad actually asked me, he goes, you're at a critical point in your time, and you obviously proved yourself in this race. Do you want to, like, we could spend this year, buy you another go-kart, go for it. Like, really go for it. And I don't know, there's something inside of myself where I'd gotten my driver's license in the States. I had came back and I had missed all my friends. And I'm like, that's going to take every weekend. I'm going to be just doing that. And as much as I love it, I don't think I want to do that. And that was one of those things where you say, okay, this is not what I want to do. I'm going to immerse myself in my senior year and enjoy it. And so I didn't even think about it. Didn't even go to a go-kart track. I just switched it off because it was important for me. I felt like if I were to make this like something I really want to do, it was either all or nothing. And I wasn't willing to do it. And I don't regret that. I think that decision was a monumental decision for me to have like a normal life. Like to go and do the things that kids do. Because the go-karting thing takes a lot of time out.
For sure.
When you're doing it like that. So
every guest that we've had that went all in through their childhood or senior year, or teenage years, or whatever, they all kind of have that same, man, what are you doing this weekend? Well, I'm at the go-kart track. Mm-hmm. So you didn't go to prom, you didn't go to these other things, you didn't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they had a lot of cool stories because they're either, at cool events or winning or stuff, but they missed out on the normalcy.
Yeah.
Standard childhood
Standard
stuff.
stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
So you end up not racing, and we talked about going to school pretty much right away. So did you go to school there in Brazil, or did you come back to the States to go to school? Or?
Then I came back to the States to go to school, and and I needed a vehicle to drive around. So I think the first thing I got was a motorcycle, like a 1978 SR 500. It was like a big single piston type piece of crap bike, but and that was not about going fast or anything. I had a car in college.
Well, you probably you went to the bike thing because you had previous experience.
Yeah.
That's like riding a bike.
Yeah. Well, the next challenge was to go to the DMV and convince them that I could really pass the motorcycle exam.
You didn't go with your cousins, did you?
That's right.
Yeah, I need a ride.
So you say you don't get back into karting for decades.
Yeah.
Like 10, 20, 30 years? Like,
must be, yeah.
Right?
I mean, because, let's fast forward. The first time that I got back into a kart, other than maybe the occasional, fun go-kart place, it's that's just not real
like
go-karts.
Boomers or whatever
Boomers,
kind of thing?
yeah, literally like that, was Dromo.
Oh, wow.
I mean, think about it. That's back from 80s. So
about 20 years.
Yeah.
Wow. And during that period of time, did you scratch the racing itch at all?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
If you're not karting,
no,
I assume.
I got to do something.
Okay.
And I mean, cars became a thing at that point for me because I had, gotten my driver's license, had a car, felt what a car would be like more at speed. It wasn't, very old used cars, beat up cars. I never had anything good. But when I finally bought my first new car, was a Mazda MX-3, 1992, and 1.8 liter. I got the double overhead cam, so it's the same engine as the Miata, but it's front wheel drive. It's a hatchback. It's not a race car at all.
Right.
But it was, I had just gotten the car, and I'd go through the canyon sometime, and then friend of mine said, "Hey, you can go to do this at in a parking lot with cones. It's for fun." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So solo to SCCA stuff, and right here in LA, back then it was at the Lion Country Safari parking lot over in Irvine, which is now demolished and become a development project. But this huge SCCA. It's like basically the same that comes out over here across the street. Where they set up cones and, you just pay $20. It's really cheap, and you get 3 runs, or you pay another $20 and you get another 3 runs, and then you have to shag the cones and do all that stuff. And I got really into that. Did the first few, was like, oh, this is not so bad. My car sucks, but I'm having fun.
Right.
Somebody said, if you buy our compound tires, you might do better. So I bought our compound tires and did it my first solo event in the rain with those, and God, it sticks in the rain. I'm blown away by that. So I did that, and then kept just investing in the car at that point. I'm like, what could I do? What's the next thing? I want to go faster in this thing, and eventually, I did solo too for 2 years, not solidly, but going to the Air Force Base out here, where they had they would do a regional, San Diego, go down to Qualcomm Stadium, do it there. There were a few places where I was going around, and started moving up the ranks, started getting some trophies, started meeting some folks, and so I started going, oh, I miss this. This is so cool, right? It's the same vibe, you meet your buddies, you different cars, and it was all about the setup. So that was one thing that cars that require a tremendous amount of tinkering, and so it's more about being prepared for all the slight little minor adjustments you're going to have to do in a car, and it's still the skill of driving through the road, through the course, and getting to know it like that. That was the one thing about solo 2 that was interesting, is it taught me the 0 to be as fast as possible in 3 laps.
Right.
And that was another learning things in go-karting. you don't ever have to do that at what I was doing before. You had plenty of practice.
Sure.
Go qualify.
Especially if you're not going to different tracks. You can just go to the same joint.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
yep.
Solo 2, they change it every time with different cones and
Yep,
whatnot.
different cones, different patches of dirt and stuff and things going on. And so I started getting to the point where I'm like, I forget what category. I think it was DSP, like the SPD category, the SP A, B, C, and whatever. Mine was one of the lowest because it was like 1.8 liter engines, lightest, smallest. And I wanted to do my first like big event. So I went out and just got my ass handed to me, man. Like, these guys have tire warmers on. I mean, it was like me with my little tire gauge and whatever, and the few things I would do, and these guys have tire warmers. And so, I was like second to last or something like that. And I thought,
it's like Brazil all over again.
Exactly. It took the air out of the balloon on that one a little bit, and I'm like, all right, well, I don't know if I want to spend that much time for this. And it was right around the time that a friend of mine said, if you want to do this at the big track, you pay a little bit more money, you can go to Willow Springs. I'm like, I can go to Willow Springs? He was like, yeah, you can do track days. I'm like, why didn't you tell me that earlier? And,
yeah. Like, we're out here driving around cones all day.
Exactly. Hitting 60 miles an hour, it was so fast. And although if you went to Lone Pine, apparently I heard that was the one where you get up to 100. But and so I went to my first true club car day, and the club that I joined was called the Touring Car Racing Association. I would become very indoctrinated in them, but at the time I was just a client, just show up, pay my $150 and race for the weekend. And it must have been like 120,000 degrees out there that day at Willow Springs. And here I am, like so hot. All these awesome cars. Like, I have my Mazda MX-3, and we have Vipers, Corvettes, Porsches, Beamers, all this stuff. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm on the same track with these cars with my little Mazda, right? But I had my R compound tires, I had my Porterfield brakes, I had all my little, little stuff. And I mean, Willow Springs is just daunting and amazing all at once to be going, $130 through turn 8 and building up to that, right? Because I now know enough about car control and enough about like what I need to do, but I've never done it at high speed. I was not afraid of the speed. That's one of the things that I was always questioning. I'm like, will I like the high speed stuff, or how does that go? I got to tell you, I loved it. I couldn't go fast. I wanted that everything was like, okay, how can I go faster? I need to be able to feel the next corner at the next highest speed and transition and stuff. And I mean, I was learning, but at the same time, it was starting to become a thing where I'm like, I think I want to go wheel to wheel now, like, how can I get to do that? And so one track event led to another track event. And before you know it, I was going every 2 months. I just look on the calendar, what was the next car club that was going out. And so I raced in SoCal. I mean, you have, like, back then was the Mustangs, Shelby Club, the Pantera Club, the Ferrari and Pantera Club. You had the Alfa Romeo Club. You had POC, PCA, and then we had the Touring Car Racing Association. So all year long, you could find something to go do, and it's like $200. It wasn't unreasonable to go and spend a weekend. Yeah, you had the tires and you had that, but if you were doing it all yourself, it wasn't too bad.
Right.
So I justified it in my head. It was probably stupid.
That's the whole sport.
Isn't it? It is. And I mean, same family feeling where you go there and everybody wants to help you out. And so, like, if anybody, like, we all are scrappy racers. And of course there's the guys who have the money, but us scrappy racers, somebody broke something, you called a friend, did whatever you could, and then that part would come in, and then you'd get that car going. And I mean, it was like this, just as much as support as you could possibly have. And the night times were so fun. I mean, we'd stop racing and you'd be out and just camping out there at night and drinking beer and talking about the racing. And so I really felt like this is, again, I'm like, okay,
You're in the environment you want to be in.
Yeah, I want to do this as much as possible, and yeah, it became a bit of a problem because all my money was going towards that. I mean, literally.
How old were you about this time?
So this is like now my upper 20s.
Okay.
You know, and
are you dating anyone, or
no,
you have a girl to worry about?
Absolutely not.
No?
That was my girlfriend.
This is the Diego show right now. Yeah. Okay.
I think maybe there was one girl at the time though.
Didn't last long.
Didn't last long. Hated going to the track.
She saw the Mazda. She's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm out."
I know what this is all about.
You're like, I had to take the seat out for a weight. You have no idea what I'm into.
Exactly. The bolts are all worn because they've been taken off and on so many times.
Yeah, that's it. Game over. So you're in your late 20s and you're doing these track days and stuff like that. All right. You say you're going to all these different clubs and whatnot. So have you gone for any more championships? Have you gone points racing at all? Or these are just track days but competitions?
Yeah.
It's wheel to wheel now.
Well, it's time trial originally. It was just for times. But then as I basically, they said, if you put a roll cage in your car, you can, and I'm like, oh, I got to do that. So I put a roll cage in my car. I put the racing seat belts. I mean, I did like everything that I needed to do to jump into the red category. And then, you have to get signed off on and everything. And so I got to that point. And then I was literally in the race group with other cars that were full race cars. And I had my little Mazda MX-3. But I would be pretty competitive, believe it or not, in the corners. And
Is it still time trials?
No, now it's full wheel to wheel, standing start.
So we're on the same page here. You drive this car to the track. You go racing. You drive this car back. You drive this car to work.
The next day.
You are racing your daily driver?
My daily driver. And sometimes I would be so tired, I'd leave the racing tires on or the pads and wouldn't care. I'm like,
Oh, man.
I mean, and it was like, there were about 10 of us. It's a great group of friends. They're so close to me. And it was like, so like every 2 or 3 weekends, we would all pack our stuff. We'd all go in a caravan together, and some guys had trailers, some guys didn't, and whatever. And that. So the Touring Car Racing Association, I ended up just racing with them because they were evolving. They were starting to go to all the tracks that I wanted to go to, and they were just the warmest group of people. And you could imagine, it's interesting. It was a lot of ex-SCCA from China and Hong Kong guys that put this club together. And they were just all about, it doesn't matter what car you have. They were non-denominational. And that was kind of interesting because you'd go to the Alpha Club and it was about having Alfa Romeos or Maseratis or whatever. These guys didn't care. So we had everything. And that was really cool. I loved the fact that they were just non-denominational and it was just about run what you brung. And we had people from all age groups, and the bench racing afterwards was so fun. And so eventually I started getting involved in running the thing, because if I would run and help them run the thing, I didn't have to pay the entry fee.
Nice.
So before,
and those $200 you're saving is really making the difference.
Exactly.
He's like, that's one tire warmer.
Nice.
It got to the point where I was doing announcing, I was a race director, I was instructor, I actually became president of the club one year. I mean, I ran the whole thing. I got to the point where I was like event manager of very large scale events in SoCal. My biggest event was, we were the first club allowed to bring in VARA, Vintage Auto Racing Association, who had gotten banned, back to Willow Springs because they had gotten into an argument with the track. And they said, look, we'll do a joint event with them. They'll play nice and let us back in. And so we did this mega event. It was our club and their club, 200 cars, 7 race groups. I mean, insane. And I was in charge of the whole thing. Imagine that. Like, that's another part. Do you guys ever know that I did that?
No.
Oh man, I that's a life that I lived. I mean, I relished in I want to put on the best event. I want to give these folks an experience, and I could do it either at the instructing level, or I could do it in the drivers' meetings, or and that sort of a thing.
We can definitely relate.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's the care to give somebody a wonderful experience, and that club really knew how to do it. Like, we got bigger, and we had this event. I still have the T-shirt. Autopalooza. It was a 3-day thing. We had car show, drag racing, the road racing, an endurance race, a concert. I mean, it was, and I wasn't running the club back then, but I was pretty high up, and so it was 1,000 people. I mean, it was insane. It was Buttonwillow. So Buttonwillow had opened up, and it became like the track to go to, and we put on the biggest event they had ever had, and it was so cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah, like when we do the Machismo, or the Grand Nationals, and we do the RV parking and stuff.
Right.
Just imagine that on steroids. I mean,
Right.
It's so much fun. That's why when I come here and I do that here for Machismo, I'm like, this is exactly.
You get that feeling back. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So anyway, but then I eventually my Mazda went away, survived somehow that whole time, and I bought a purpose-built race car. My first race car acquisition was an old Toyota Celica celebrity race car from the Long Beach Grand Prix series.
Oh, wow. What year?
Cool.
Yeah. Oh boy, it's the All Track. It's
Is that the bug eye?
It's not the one with the round lights. It's the one after the round lights. So it was a very curvy one, and then there was more of a straight line one.
Right, okay.
It was the straighter line one. No, actually, it was kind of curvy. But it had the lights that went up and down like this.
Got it. Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was
Those are cool.
Yeah.
Those are cool.
They had a version of it that was all-wheel drive.
Didn't they? I think you actually saw one out here recently.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that same one.
That
right?
same exact one.
Okay.
So it was, at the time when they were getting rid of the fleet to get the new one in, we were connected with some of those guys, with Danny McKeever, and he sold like 11 of those to us. And so imagine we all got the same car.
Oh man.
Oh, that was
So
so
got
cool.
your own class.
Yeah. And it was, everybody would come every round with a little bit of an adjustment here, a little new thing there.
What did Diego find this time? What did this guy find?
Exactly. We would take the knife to the car and take off as much weight as possible. And anyway, one of the pictures I sent you actually was of that car here at the California Speedway at the Roval. That was when I had built it out, like I had done everything. I'd blown the engine, I'd replaced it for a higher compression Japanese.
Blowing the engine.
Spectacularly too.
He's trying to find the needles on this thing.
First thing he does is open it up.
Right. How can I lead it out? I want to make it sound so good.
Call into Brazil. Say, what was the setting?
Oh, that's too funny.
So you're doing all this car stuff and whatnot. And do you at any point, are you going for points championships here? Are we starting to get into any of that kind of stuff, or is it still just doing these one-offs and hanging out with the friends and stuff like that?
It's different because so the race group is everything. There's no two race groups in at least the touring car racing series. So we had all these time trial groups and then one race group. So you would have sub categories. So the car that I would be in, the group I'd be in would be the under 2.2 liter. They literally changed the rule to 2.2 because of all the Celicas. It used to be under 2. And we're like, why are we in that category? Let's just change the rule.
I know a guy.
But we're racing against Vipers. I mean,
no chance.
Yeah, ACR Viper. The guy goes blowing by me like twice the speed down Willow Springs. Like
it's usually those guys that can't make a corner though. So you're like,
totally.
I got a good fighting chance.
Yeah. As long as we don't race at Auto Club, we might have something here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is so true, Derek. I mean, I can't tell you how many events where you have that guy that's like, I got my big $300,000 car.
Yeah,
I'm so fast, and then you go in the corner and
he's parking it every time. Yeah, or he just misses it.
Or he misses it every time.
Yeah.
Does that mean I must be in the fast group?
Yeah.
I need to be in the fast group.
I love that.
Yeah, but in terms of competition, so I actually I won a few of those races because the way that not that one because it's the overall, but we used to have the joint events with the Vintage Auto Racing Association. We would then have those guys just had race groups.
Gotcha.
And then it was just up like 35 of all 2.2 liter and under, and twice I won those. Nice. And anytime there was a race in the rain, oh man, I was eating up Corvettes.
I didn't even ask you. Did you get a chance to race in the rain down in Brazil when you're doing karting?
I hear they have
So-
some heavy rain.
Yeah.
It's tropical,
sprinkles.
you might say.
Nice.
So this story is totally worth saying. I forgot about this one, man. So the one time, and it was literally just one time, when we were racing in the first track, the one at the big Formula One where you have the long straightaways
Right.
and chicanes, total downpour, right? Tropical rainstorm like you wouldn't believe. And we didn't have rain tires at the time. My dad, we hadn't bought it. We didn't have the resources to do it at that moment. So basically, just run with your slicks. And the top half of the field had rain tires. The other half of the field probably had front rain tires, but no rear, or some combination just to have something. I and about 3 other guys had nothing. I'd never raced in the rain before, had no idea. We go down the front straightaway. First time we're doing, it's a rolling start. So we do one lap, and the first thing I'm noticing, I'm like, I cannot see anything out of this helmet. It's fogging up, and there's so much spray on it. I literally can't see anything. I'm trying to somehow get out of line and do something, and we approach the start, and my brain's like, well, just go for it. Foot on it, and hopefully everything will work out. Forgetting that because when we were going down the front straight the first time, I actually kind of had followed somebody off to the left and didn't realize there was a reason. There's a giant puddle on the right-hand side.
So they're trying to miss it, yeah.
And because of the spray, I can't see anything. We're going like top speed, just foot on it. I hit the puddle. I did 7 violent 360s down the front straightaway in front of everybody, and it just would never stop. and finally came to a stop somehow, or I don't know how. And they immediately they got me going again because like, you got to go, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. Like, you got to go. I'm like, so we get going, and I'm driving, and just like complete terror.
White knuckle.
Oh my God. I mean,
And
everything.
you're a munchkin, too.
Yeah. I was a kid. And so the way to go back around the track, you had to actually go into the pit entrance. So it was a long S, and there were metal barricades on the outside. It was a racetrack.
Naturally, yeah.
Slid out and smacked one of those things super hard. So that's probably the hardest hit I've had in go-karting at that point. Bruised everything. And they wanted to get me going again. And I'm just like, I'm a kid. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. If they've just got me going. And I'm literally like probably crying in the go-kart, finishing that race, hating life. Like just,
yeah,
I hate this. I don't want to do this. Finished the race. We had 2 rounds. So I want to go do another heaping of this fun stuff, right? No, I literally hid. I did. My dad's like, and he's like, no, you got to go race. I'm like, no. And so I just hid. I avoided it. I did not want to do it. I was so scared. And it took me a long time to get over that. The whole idea of racing in the rain, it was
Scarred.
daunting. It's scarred. Yeah.
No wonder the cart wasn't so good. That's why that right there. When his dad got the car, he left that part out. No wonder his dad was finishing in the back. Old young Morales put it in the fence again. At least he had an excuse this time.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to fast forward here to when you get back into the karting thing.
Yeah.
You got a chance to do the car stuff and get to do these other things. You had said you'd taken a couple years off. What I find interesting though is that you do gravitate to the car stuff.
Yeah.
And do you not even, aside from doing the boomers thing, did you not even look up karting back? Because again, you didn't do it in the States except for those couple times when you were a teenager.
Right.
Did you never even look it up when you got, especially living here in California?
Right. Honestly, no.
Wow.
Let's put it this way. It was a curiosity in the back of my mind, but it was never enough time to go explore that. And I had so much of the itch satisfied with all the production car racing that you know what I mean? Like, I would just be resting between those massive weekends of doing that stuff. It wasn't like, oh, let's go karting. Didn't happen.
Gotcha.
Which I missed. There was something inside of me though that the first time that I did it, outside of Dromo, where I went into it to like really start karting, I did do one time. I went shifter karting with Doug Hayashi. He's a famous production car guy, ex-Microsoft guy. He has NSX Files as his thing. And anyway, him, and he's got this group of people, and they have the best stories in the world. They go all over the world doing racing. And so he invited me because he knew I had done karting before. And he's like, hey, we have an extra shifter car. You want to come over to Willow Springs go-kart track and go have fun with us? I'm like, hell yeah. And so I did it. But stupid me, right? They're like, oh, we have a rib protector. Rib protector? What do you need that for? Oh, you need it. I'm like, no, I never used to use a rib protector. Screw that.
They were probably, tough guy over here knows what he's doing.
Exactly. Yeah. Tough, stupid guy.
Yeah. And knowing what we know even now with all the other interviews we've done, right?
Yeah.
When he's running, it's not super quick. It's not, it's still 100cc, but the tires, everything like that, the chassis aren't working as good. Yeah. The level of speed at that point in G-force versus a shifter kart in the what year-ish?
Oh, man. This is more modern times. Late
90s, early 2000s?
Yeah.
Right? So we're talking
fairly soft tire.
heyday of the Pro Moto Tour kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. You should be all right with that rib protector. Yeah, you should be good.
And I should have just paid attention. Look at the way they were looking at me. I'm like, whatever. So what did I do? I ended up breaking a rib just driving the damn thing. I literally cracked a rib because I drove all day long. It started hurting. It started hurting really badly. But of course, I'm not going to give up. This is what I used to do. And so what they said is they probably had split it. And then I never went to go get it checked out. And then I was wrestling with my brother. And he slammed me into the ground and went, I'm like, oh. And
he walked away. He's like, that's why you don't pick on me. He's like, that's what happens.
That's for 1979 right there. Boy, I've been waiting on that one. That's why I don't hang out with my brother.
Last time you touched me.
Oh, brother.
So you broke it.
And Alex, if you're listening to this, you're going to get a crack out of it. Anyway, so I didn't go to the hospital.
Oh, smart.
And then, 2 months later, I'm like laughing or something. It's still hurting. Finally, go to the doctor, and he's like, "Yeah, well, that's been broken for a while." I'm like, "Been broken for a while?" And he goes, "Oh, take a look at it." So it already had a big knuckle around it. I had fully broken my ribs, and I'd never done it. And not that you can do anything about it, but it was one of those things. So to this day, that's one of the reasons why I cannot drive the regular outdoor karts without a rib protector.
Right.
That same spot comes back immediately.
You say it's on your left side.
Yeah.
Okay, mental notes.
No, it was right. It was right.
Yeah. Right. Now you remember. Yeah.
We actually was it your back you hurt or the ribs you hurt recently?
Oh, my back.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Oh man, I tell you, that was a real kind of a eye opener for me, awakening, I guess, of the realities of your body, man. Like to throw your back out in the middle of the Ironman, not in the middle, towards the end of the Ironman. And you guys saw me. Mm-hmm. I was in so much pain, no strength whatsoever, thinking, I got a whole round of racing to do after this.
Right. And then I got work on Monday.
And he didn't care about work. We know Diego.
Yeah, actually, right.
The freaking race.
He's like, this round's already paid for.
Yeah, you see him start going backwards on the race. Like, he's going to blame the cart. He's going to frickin' blame the cart. Man, it was getting back into the so you go and do the shifter kart deal.
Yep.
It goes swimmingly in the long story there. But
really quick for the shifter kart story, did they say I told you so? Did your buddy say I told you so?
Well, they never got a chance to because
did you hide it from them?
Oh, totally.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was
okay.
Yeah.
Teeth clenched. I had a great time, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And then on the way home, he's crying the entire time. God, I actually hurt my ribs at a race. I think I've probably even told the story before, but I was at a street race, and I drove. It was about 2+ hours away, and I drive up there, do the race, hurt myself, and I hurt myself bad enough that I can't continue. My ribs. This was the worst wreck I've ever had, and it just ended up separating cartilage and all kinds of crap. I'm on both sides of my ribs. It was really bad. It hurt. So a brake failure at the end of a straightaway, and I spin around and I hit the fence. Anyways, I'm in so much pain, and the adrenaline's wearing off, or whatever. And I get in the truck, and if is a little Ford Ranger, and I'm just moving. It's a manual too, which is fantastic, but it's mostly freeway, and I'm hurting and I'm hurting, and I am able to just like make these small movements. Well, anyway, I get kind of stuck in this position of the bench seat of this truck, so that when I finally get home after being in the seat for 2-3 hours or whatever it is to get home, I can't move. I can't move. I can't get out of the car in just the amount of pain that I was in. And I was working at the indoor track, so my job was to drive go-karts.
Oh, my God.
And anyway, I did not get back in the seat and drive anything for 8 months, 6 to 8 months. Like, I did any and all schooling I could from outside the seat. Other people were doing the driving for me and stuff like that. And I don't think I was back to 8 months. Might be a little bit long, as I might have been like doing the standard schools, but I'm not driving regularly.
Yeah.
And then I probably wasn't right for, over a year and a half, maybe pushing 2 years of like where you can just be normal. You just have a little bit of pressure, and But yeah, when you have a rib injury,
it's
life
for
hurts.
life. Yeah.
Life hurts, man. You can't breathe, you can't sneeze,
Can't sleep.
you can't. And I hit both sides, so I'm like, I couldn't no matter what I did.
Oh.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yep.
So I can feel for you, but also you're an idiot. How did you? Okay, let's get right into this Dromo thing. How did you get back into karting? And as you say, competitively. And then why did you leave cars then?
Yeah.
I assume.
Yeah. So, so life changes things. And I'd spent my whole time pouring money into racing, basically. And, for quite a while, I was, not saving any money for anything other than that. And you tend to grow up a little bit and you realize, okay, you're going to get married and, have to start saving some money. So racing took a back seat, sold the car, got married, got divorced. And but then that had made a transition to not being in the production stuff and focusing more on other, like my career and other things. And but that's what was perfect about Dromo, because then all of a sudden I arrive at this place and I try the go-karts out. And I'm like, oh, this is fun. I remember this is so much fun. And the track's kind of slippery. I'm not used to slippery. So that was kind of all unique. And I go, and Dromo had that thing. It wasn't a time trial. It was a race.
Every time. Yep. Actually, qualifying for us too.
Yep. Qualifying, standing start, which was the other thing I liked. And then I heard they had a league. And I'm like, oh, I'm curious, let's go see what this is about. And when I saw their first league, I was like, oh my God, these guys are good. And this is like super family friendly.
Half my age. Yeah. At this point. Because I know some of the names that are going to pop up, Yeah. But no, that's, you definitely found a place like, I can do this and not have to put all the work into it,
Yeah.
Besides actually driving, you're like, this is arrive and drive, baby. This is nice.
It's perfect. It fell right in my lap. It's inexpensive,
exactly,
but so competitive. I mean, that was the thing that struck me, and to this day, that's why I just love what we do here, right? Because I realized that you don't have to spend the money. I mean, when you were asking me about being competitive in production car racing, I'm like, I'm not really being that competitive out there. I'm fast, but I'm not doing amazing passes or amazing chess games because it just never really happens. Mm-hmm. At least not at the level that I think it could happen, right? Like for me, go-kart racing is so intense and so close. Production car racing at that level, the amateur level, doesn't even come close.
Right.
Like sometimes I'd make a move and freak the guys out because they're like, "Wow, you almost hit me." I'm like, "No, I didn't."
Right.
But anyway,
right.
Dromo then brought all that back, and
right.
and then it was, we're talking Bill Myers, Jay Shriver, Casey Rising, Todd Lewis, all the guys who were there in the very beginning.
What year is this roughly that you're doing this?
2005, 6 maybe, because I think I did Dromo for like 3 years and then they closed in 2009, right?
Early 10.
Okay. So then maybe 7, maybe 6, 7, around that.
It was definitely 6 because that's when I met you.
Okay.
At the World Championship.
Right. So maybe like say probably 2005.
So you, again, going back to you just started doing karting again when that whole thing happened. So you're getting into, and I know this, that Dromo is actually a hotbed of competitive arrive and drive karting in 2006.
Yeah.
And so you got a chance to jump right into this. How did that go right out of the gate? And as you say, family oriented. It was very cool. Everybody's chummy and stuff like that. Are you good right out of the gate? Do you get the old Brazilian thing back in rolling?
Well, kind of. I was so excited to do my first league race, right? Because I know so much about racing, but I've never done indoor karting,
Right?
And the technicality that it involves, and all the aspects of sliding and things like that. And so I knew I just told myself, you know what? Go in there. You don't expect to be the fastest guy. Learn. Do everything that you used to do. Reset. Go back to the beginning and just absorb what is it that it's going to take. You'll get there. I just kept telling myself, you'll get there. So my first race, I mean, I did okay. I wasn't in last and whatever, but I was not right off the bat quick, and I was just like not frustrated by that at all, because I'm like, it's slidey stuff. I don't know this stuff. It's all foreign to me. So I went there a few more times to practice, and I'm like, oh, I can figure this stuff out. Like, I started realizing how much fun that subtleness of the sliding and the accuracy that you have to have in indoor karting, something that I just love to this day, that it is so pinpoint precise, and yet so like you have to understand what the kart's telling you, and every kart's different. That's the other thing that never existed for me, right? I always drove something that I owned. So it just was like this mind-blowing experience of how this could be if I kept at it. So I really wanted to get good at it. And then by, I don't know, maybe if I were to say, like, within 3 races, I was starting to be competitive. And then after that, it just kept getting better and better and better. And to the point where, Dromo became my first real, like, championship feeling of, okay.
You get back in the swing, you are competitive, you're in the, and this is like you said, right up your alley and all those other kinds of crap.
Yeah.
I know in 2006 is when it was either 6 or 7. The first world championship I ever went to was in 6. The first ever happened here was, or it ever happened, this is for Arrive and Drive, the Indoor Karting World Championship was in 2005.
Yep.
That was the first one. I did not go to that one, so I'm not sure if you did or not.
Did not.
So if you went to 6, the second one, then yeah, that was the same time. I knew it was in the States through 7 and came back. Anyways, when you start doing this again and you get back into karting, I happen to know you also did some competition karting as well here and there.
Yes.
But not like full season stuff, right?
No.
You just did here and there kind of with Gators, I think it was.
Yeah, with a Rotax.
What was
a wonderful experience. It was so amazing.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, in fact, no, you sent me a picture. It was an old, it was a Burrell. It was an FTK, I believe. I believe it was a Burrell, but it was, it looked just like one of the ones that Andy Saisman would have put together with the Full Throttle Karting, which was just down the road from Dromo,
right,
as well. And I happen to know that he also had stuff at Dromo hanging out there. I'm going down this competition karting route again. We'll maybe go back to the Arrive and Drive.
Yep.
But I happen to know that there was a really good driver there at Dromo, a kid. Jeremy Kane? Am I saying? I think it's Jeremy.
No, Casey Rising?
No. This is a competition kart. It was a kid, Jeremy Kane. He ended up he did a little bit there, and then was doing the competition stuff. But I know that he did it. John Kimbrell went out and did it.
Yep.
You did it, but not full season stuff. Now, how did that work out? Like, like an Arrive and Drive deal, and just go check things out. And where did you go racing?
Okay, so that was very cool. So there were 2 seasons at Dromo. The first season, it was pretty much locked up in terms of, Casey Rising was the guy to beat, and he had total dominance there. He was an amazing driver. And then me and Todd Lewis were battling for second place, basically. And that was a very epic battle that reminded me of this one this past weekend. But and during that year, there was I'm struggling to remember, because Todd Lewis did win one year. Yeah, sorry, I take that back. He won the year after that, and the prize was a day at karting at the next Rotax thing with a full throttle karting where you just arrive and drive. It was a full package, and Todd couldn't do it, and he said, "Hey, Diego, why don't you go in my place?" I'm like, dude, love to do that. I haven't done that.
The only time being second paid off.
Yeah, there you go.
That's right.
Yeah, another second place for Diego Morales. So, anyways, yeah, you were saying, yeah, when
Todd tells you that, you're like, I got to buy a rib car and all. Yeah.
Anyways, You ended up going. You said was it Willow Springs?
No, Streets of Willow.
Oh, Streets. Okay.
And so I was just thrilled because I know Streets of Willow from the production cars. I'm thinking if you're driving a kart there flat out, that's got to be super fast. And yes, it was unbelievably fast. It brought me back to my Brazilian days, and I was like, I'll never forget this. So Andy and what's the guy that used to work here?
Eric Thompson.
Yeah, Eric Thompson. So it was the two of them, and they didn't know who I was. I show up, and they're like, "Oh, who's this guy?" And kind of talking to me, like giving me all the little basics of stuff, and I'm like, I've done this before. I'm okay, but I'm gonna be very humble. I'm gonna be like, look, just try me out. Just let me do it, and then you tell me.
And just so we're on the same page, aside from that shifter cart escapade,
yeah.
This is the first time you're in the go-kart since that Brazilian race.
Correct.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But now with a lot of Dromo experience under my belt, which, just kind of get me back into the whole karting thing.
Right.
So the speed was amazing. I mean, just being flat out at streets where you're hitting some areas where you're just catching so much air, there's like really, really high speed stuff and go up over the hill and down. And, but I loved it. I mean, I just was like, ooh. This is so back to what I used to do, but I've never driven it on a road course other than the Brazilian track, and so I've never had that. Maybe that shifter kart experience at the Willow track where it's smaller, but not something wide open like I used to do, right? So I was fast. I mean, they came in, I knew this. They had turned down stuff because they didn't want me going wrecking it on the first lap, and they didn't know who I was. But then they saw my times, and I was telling them, I go, why is my engine hitting the rev limiter down the straightaway? And he's like, we'll fix that. And then they opened it up for me, and I put it on pole.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
And then in the group that I was, and everybody that was like, who the hell is this guy with the funny looking helmet? And it ended up being, Mike, I'll connect this story to you eventually, but that we go out for the final, and they do the double start where there's two groups out there at the same time. So basically they have to start the race, right? Once the first group goes, you're committed for the second group. And I was on pole. We're going around the track, and I had no idea, nobody had told me this, that when they do the race, you don't drive around the entire Streets of Willow. You only do the shortcut.
Uh-huh.
But because I was on pole, and you know me, whenever I start on pole, I go out fast to warm up the tires. I drove right past it. And all of a sudden, I'm like, where is everybody? I turn around.
Oh, shit.
They're headed towards
the race
start.
has started, my friend. Aye.
So I'm like, oh, and I kind of figured it out in my head, and because I could see all their heads looking at me kind of like laughing, right? I'm like, okay. God damn it. And I laid down the fastest lap I could to get back on the front straightaway. It was coming down the hill when they threw the green. So I'm half of a straightaway behind the entire field. But that fueled me, man. I was just, I'm going to go get these guys, and ended up on the podium still. So
nice.
And again, these guys are like, what? Who's this guy? But it was a warm group of people, and then ended up meeting...
Jay Zamora and Bud Burner,
and they were kind of really enamored with me, so they talked to me a little bit, and I told them about indoor karting, and I told them about my, that's where I've done my racing, and they're like, really? Huh. And then
is this 2007-ish?
Yeah,
6 or 7,
right?
Okay.
Yeah. A bit time later, I get an email or a phone call out of the blue from Jay Zamora going, hey, Diego, remember we met at that go-kart race, and, you did really well. You really impressed us, and I just wanted to see if maybe you'd be interested in coming to us on a trip we do once a year where we go to, do the Jeff Gordon charity race in North Carolina. And I'm like, charity race? Okay, that sounds kind of cool. And he's like, yeah, we race at the Victory Lane Karting facility. I'm like, Victory Lane Karting? Oh, I've been there, or I've heard of them or something like that. I can't remember exactly. And like, oh, okay, well, it sounds like this might work out. He goes, but don't worry, we're going to pay for everything. We're going to fly you out there, book you in a hotel. I'm like, this is like a full-on, like, you're going to
sponsor
gig. And he's like, oh, yeah. And he goes, and if you have anybody that you think might be good, and then they start describing to me the event, and I go, I see what you guys want to do. You guys want to bring in the ringers, and you want to win this race, because they had gone there for years, and no one's ever beat Jeff Gordon at his game. And the person that I thought of at the moment, I've met Mike. We've spent time together. We've become friends, and in my mind, I know the level of racing that Mike brings to the table, and I'm like, if there's one guy you need to bring, it's Mike Smith. So I call him up, and I go, guess what, Mike? How would you like to race against Jeff Gordon?
Who, I don't know if you knew at the time, we'd actually gotten to that in the conversation, but was my hero as a munchkin.
Yep.
And so the answer was obviously yes before I figured out I could or could not do it.
Before you finish asking the question you already had on your Rainbow Warrior
Would
jacket.
you? Yes.
Bags are packed.
Yeah. Absolutely yes. Yeah. That was spring. That was May of 2008.
Yeah.
No, I think it might have been 7 because I did it 3 times.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
and the third time was 2000.
Are you sure you're not confusing it with a 24-hour gathering?
No, because we did the 24, because that was part of the 24 at one time. But in 2009, I brought Jesse Dana, who I was coaching, and John Kimbrell, and I had done it twice already at that point, and I was there as the coach in 9.
Right.
I think it was 7.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it was 7 the first time.
The first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And God, that doesn't seem right though, because it's so weird that we do this. And I start thinking about dates and like little things. Nope, it had to be 7. And the reason why I feel like it had to be 7, because maybe it was in the fall of 7 and then the spring of 8. And the reason why is because I remember sitting at a bar at the hotel with you, and we were watching the presidential debates between Obama and McCain, and we were talking about that as well.
Yeah.
So that had to have been because he became president in 08. Right. Right.
Yeah.
So that means it had to have been fall of 7 that we're watching the presidential debates.
Right.
But I remember it was quick turnaround. It was 7 that happened in the fall, but then they linked it up with the All-Star race and stuff like that in the spring of 8.
So there wasn't even a full year in between.
Exactly.
Right.
That's how it happened.
Yeah.
I might cut all that crap out there. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So you give this guy Mike a call.
I give this guy, Smitty, a call and say, "Oh, how would you like to meet your hero, your racing hero?" And the funny thing is that I mean, I spoon fed him the whole thing, and they're going to pay for the flight, and they're going to pay for a hotel, and they're going to buy us a brand new race suit. And I'm like, it doesn't get any better than this.
This is your guys' big break.
Oh, yeah. Exactly.
We've made it.
Yeah. It was awesome.
Well,
I mean,
and for me, doing the Gord thing was huge, but I was still in the all in. Like I had just started getting back into. I started working in 2003 in karting, in indoor karting, right? And I was pretty good at it locally and whatnot. I started getting these delusions of grandeur that maybe I could make something out of it. So I was filled with all of this. Oh my gosh, Jeff Gordon and all the kinds of crap. And if I do good, maybe all kinds of shit. But just like that opportunity to go and do something like this and to have a chance phone call from a guy I happen to have met at an indoor race.
Yep.
And just all of those things and how they aligned was pretty damn
serendipitous.
Cool.
Yeah.
And when we did go, and it went pretty well.
It went pretty well, man. That was so much fun. I mean, I'll never forget that story. For me, like the anticipation of doing something where someone has literally they're treating us like a professional race car driver, and they did it on purpose. Like Jay and them had this philosophy that they were bringing these guys, and these guys were going to be doing this thing for them, and they wanted to make sure they were treated right. And it was so cool to have them like do that for us. And so we get there, and then obviously everything changes as soon as you get to the track, and it's Mike and I just like putting on our helmets going, I wonder how this is going to go, but I think we're going to do okay. And we go out and practice, and Jeff's out there. And when you first see him, I mean, he comes in with this entourage and everything.
So is it you two guys are the the only karters that really know what they're doing, or
well,
is there more depth? Because obviously Jeff has done it before, so he kind of has an idea.
Well, yeah. So there's a couple different things just to I mean, if I remember in 7, the first time we did it, Diego and I were definitely the cream of the crop. Besides Jeff, there's no weight or anything like that. Everybody's.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm not the custom build that I am currently at that time.
Custom.
I was more of a 2000 or 180 because I was trying to do like competition karting too. Jeff's not a big guy. He's like 5'4". There's a picture of all of us together. He's like 5'4" and like maybe $140. So it's not like he's heavy. And we're running the indoor karts and whatnot. But what they did is you did these qualifying rounds to make it into the final.
Yeah.
And Jeff he always started in the back. And they invert the times. So if you're least fast, you start out front. And so it was Jeff, me, and then Diego from the back to the front. And there's 12 or 15 of us or whatever it is
for the final
race.
By the way, they give him his own cart. He has a special cart number 24 that's set aside just for him.
Okay.
So it's not like there's this apparent.
Yeah, ours are random draw.
Yeah.
He's got the cart.
The cart. So all of that, right? Like,
right.
you know, but the best story that I have from that one also, aside from the race result, is that during practice, Jeff's starting to figure out quickly the helmets and the suits, and he's going, wait a minute, you know, and he's looking at Jay and stuff, and then we're going on to practice session just behind me, and he totally spins me out NASCAR style in one corner, where I'm spun out looking at him, and I could see the smile in his face, and I'll never forget that. For me, that's my Jeff Gordon moment.
That's awesome,
right?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean,
there was only one way for him to get around you.
Oh yeah,
and it wasn't clean.
I had a similar, not exactly the same situation, but I had a situation in practice as well. And he again, to Diego's point, he would pay attention to who's quick or whatnot, and he'd go hit up them. It's not like Jeff's running at VLK all the time, right?
Right.
But he's a smart cookie, and these guys are getting around here pretty good. And actually, that was the very first time that Diego and I had been there as well.
Right.
But it was a charity event. Diego and I have driven indoor karts before. We pick shit up fast. Jeff figures this out. He's running with us all the time. I remember going into this fast corner and then down into this hairpin, and I get moved out of the way, and I look over, and it's Jeff, and he goes by me. And I think this may be the very first time I ever pulled a Smitty, where I just don't turn. And I get to the inside of him on the very next corner, and I just don't turn. And then I cut, and I get around him. And afterwards, he's like, that was awesome. He's like,
Oh, man.
I thought for sure you were going to dump me. And you didn't. You did that, and I'm like, that's even better. I couldn't believe it. It was awesome. And what was even really was super cool about, and one of the things that I remember about it was Diego and I had to come from the back, but Jeff had tow hooks out. He rolled right with us in the final, and Diego and I had communications. They allowed communications in the race, and I ended up getting out to a lead, and Diego's second at the time. Like I get up to Diego and I go through the field, and I make a move on Diego, and I get in front of him, and now it's Diego and I, and Jeff is with us. Diego doesn't exactly make it easy for Jeff whatsoever, and so my lead ends up growing. And I remember on the final lap, Diego and I are just talking back and forth, and he's like, you got it, we're gonna do it, we got it. And I won, and I believe you finished second.
I did.
You finished second,
Oh, cool.
and then Jeff. And we achieved what we were, quote, paid to do.
Right.
And not only that, we also built the relationship with Bud and Jay, and helped them out. And I want to say they both made the final as well. And that was, like, I think the first time they made the final.
Right.
Or both. No, the first time they both made the final.
Right.
And so that was super cool. And at the end, it was like everybody was stoked that I won. I was like, oh my God, somebody actually beat Jeff Gordon. I was like, It's awesome. It was on, not TV, but little stupid media things or whatever. And I just remember it being just the coolest damn experience.
Yep.
From start to finish. Just
Yeah.
the way we were treated.
For sure, yeah.
And then going through the whole thing and having media and having interviews and TV and radio. And I was like, good golly.
Not to mention, we got to sit at the table with Jeff Gordon and have dinner with him.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
And just
his
bullshitting
wife
with him.
it was unbelievable.
That was so cool.
And then we went to Hendricks Motorsport and got a private tour of the factory.
Oh, shit.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah. We got to hang out with, who was the
coach.
was it Letarte at the time?
I wouldn't remember his name,
can't
but he was a nice guy, really cool guy. Tall guy. Was a tall guy.
Yeah, I think it might have been Letarte. Anyway, it was frickin' bitchin'.
Yeah.
That was one of the coolest damn experiences, and all because old Diego Morales gave Mike Smith a call.
That's
and
right.
I owe you all that, buddy, because
Oh no, you paid me back big time.
I got a chance
you gave
to
me
go.
an incredible experience after that too. I gave him one in life, and he gave me one back.
Nice.
what did I give you? I don't remember.
You allowed me to put myself in the World Championship
Oh,
committee,
That's right.
which I've been cherish that and love it, and to this day
about
I'm still there and
Yeah.
enjoying that.
That was cool. Yeah, so the World Championship we were talking about where Diego and I first met in 2006. So we're going, we're just drivers. We're just racing and whatnot. And a guy named Carlos Carneros, he was the head. It was his brainchild. He did the whole thing.
And he's my childhood friend too, by the way.
Oh, that's
okay.
right. I forgot
I
about
grew
that.
up with him as a kid.
He's
Oh, cool.
Brazilian.
Yep.
And he started the whole World Championship thing. And long story short, it was okay. It was like 50 something odd people or whatever it was in 2005, and it blew up in 6 and got huge. And certain things weren't super smooth, or the way things were running weren't to the par that some of the people from Europe were thinking. And there's a lot of people who wanted to see some change or wanted to have some input, the best way I could put it. And in 2000, and so there's pressure put on Carlos to start a committee or a group of people to talk about things. That started in 7. And I raised my hand that I absolutely want to be a part of this because, I got 2 cents to say and blah, blah, blah. Long story short, they started the committee. It was decided that it was going to move around to other countries at that point, blah, blah, blah. And I was on the committee through 2000. You
were on there for a while.
A little bit.
Oh.
I can't remember exactly when I stopped. But point is, I thought that I was kind of getting out of it might have been 10 that I got out because I was starting to do changing jobs. I didn't have my team anymore. I wasn't going to the races anymore. I couldn't go to Europe anymore. While I was on the committee, though, I did the drivers' meeting in Europe at Kortrijk in
Belgium.
In Belgium.
Oh, cool.
And I remember, and I was, have anxiety, right?
Oh,
yeah.
My anxiety is through the roof.
I'm trying to calm him down.
Yeah.
You had to learn how to speak Belgium overnight.
Flemish. Not to get into that too much, but anyway, I'm there, and I have this is the first time that I was talking to a bunch of people that weren't English speaking. Is their first language anyway. I mean, everybody pretty much knew English, but I was through the roof. And anyway, I tried to joke around and make things a little bit light and whatever. I had a few people from other countries go, that was the best drivers' meeting we've ever been. Usually they just go on about rules and crap like that, and you kind of made fun of some things and whatnot. I'm like, all right, sweet. But anyway, I got to learn and meet a bunch of cool people over the years in the committee and being a part of the World Championship.
And steering the direction of the whole thing, too.
Yeah, I wrote all the rule books at the time,
exactly.
or at least the framework of them. We all came up with the stuff. I just wrote the rule books anyway. Oh, yeah, it was a good time. But anyway, when I was not going to do it anymore and they needed another American representative besides myself and Tom Godfrey, it was, I know one person specifically. It was Diego Morales, who's held that mantle ever since.
That's right. Yeah. Took
absolutely.
the torch, and it's been burning bright ever since.
Yeah.
So what was your what year was the first World Championship that you guys went to then?
Together 2006.
Yeah,
So
in
you
the
started
US.
in 5.
So your first year was 2006 for Dromo?
Maybe 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
So about a year you've been doing the indoor stuff.
Yeah.
Decided
and I
to
go to
go-
the World Championship.
Decided to go to the World Championship.
Would have never gone, actually, had it not been for Carlos, who's been my childhood friend, who hits me up and he goes, hey, man, we're putting this thing together. Why don't you come? And I'm like, well, how good do you have to be? And he goes, it doesn't matter. Come on, just go.
Right.
Yeah. And then you show up and go, holy shit.
Yeah.
Exactly. We all have that.
Yeah.
Oh my God moment where you're looking at the timesheets or you're just looking at people going through corners and going, oh, that's a whole new level, man. I've never seen that.
It's like you hanging out at the end of the straightaway back home and watching Senna go down in there. It's no different.
It really is.
So the speed is that much better because you're seeing different drivers do different stuff. And actually, we talked about this when Pro Tour was here last year. You know, there was a huge national presence and some international drivers came over to race here at CalSpeed. And when you have those moments, you know, the local guys already know the track and they're kind of like, this is one way of doing it. And the new guy shows up and you see that different way. Like, never would have thought of that.
Yeah.
You know, so you kind of pick that up. And that's the benefit of doing these big events like that. So the speed is obviously a big thing, a big split, right? I'm sure from some drivers to the next. How was the racing?
So daunting. I mean, because everything that I thought I had learned at Dromo, even though I hadn't spent that much time doing it, and I'm going to speak of both times because it took a while to even be anywhere near competitive for me.
Right.
I mean, it took me, Mike was a lot faster right off the bat and he had a lot more experience in indoor karting, but I think that it was at a point where it's not just that you have to click off lap times as consistently and I mean, we're talking like, you know, an inhumane level of consistency.
Right.
But the concentration level and the chess game aspect of it, all of that, and then add to that different styles. Like to your point, you have the Brazilians, super aggressive, crazy, like, you know, wickedly aggressive. You have the Europeans, super precise, like their technique is unbelievable.
A little bit more finesse, I bet. Yeah.
A little more finesse. And then they also have this thing where when they pass you, if you pass them, they'll pass you right back. Like they will when you think you're going to let off your guard, boom, they're right back by you again and stuff like that. And also having to deal with the fact that there's a lot of communication going around that you have no idea what they're talking about. Like here, you can hear everybody. You know, if they're going to say something, you hear. There, you're hearing languages, and you have they're looking at me, literally talking their ears off about something, and I have no idea what they're saying. So I can't pick up on those cues. So much of this, you know, on top of
different aspects.
Yeah, and the pressure. You just feel it. You're going into it. It's the tension, the emotionality, and some people just break down under those conditions, me included, until you learn, okay, this is a different level, and so now I have to calm myself down and work on those aspects of, because I never felt that really until the World Championships. That unbelievable, like, heart is pounding. You're ready to go to a race, and you are so freaking out about it. Learn to put all that down.
Yeah, you remember where I was talking about the supernats and the hype and the vibe that you just feel in the paddock?
Yeah.
That
tension.
Yeah, you have that same kind of hype and feel at this event. And it's because of it's a big event for arrive and drive karting, for indoor karting. I mean, but also because of the different nationalities, because of the language barriers, but also just because of that, you know what it is. Like, you know, it's supernats, so it's huge. You know, this is the world championship, and by lack of a better term, it is a meeting of the best of the best.
Right.
And that in and of itself is why it gives you that hype, that feeling. You just know that you're rubbing elbows with the best people from Belgium, the best people from Brazil, the best people from wherever. And it pushes you. It drives you.
That was what was so neat about the Grands, because I came into karting, like when I started karting, it was K1. And Dromo, I may have heard of, but it was right at the tail end as I was getting into it. And so I never had that different experience. You know, that Dromo is definitely a lot different than what indoor karting is nowadays. But I mean, when I first started coming out to CalSpeed and doing Super Series, there was an intensity, but it was still a pretty friendly environment. And it was crazy how much I felt that environment change at the same track when the Grands came to town.
Right.
And when I did a few sessions on the optional practice days, and I was out there around the Briars racing team, all the guys from England, right? And I'm like, man, these guys came here to win. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure they're having fun too, but the goal is win. Fun is second. Where I'm like, oh, this is so much fun being at CalSpeed and doing a national event, and it was just so crazy seeing. I mean, there was a lot of people from all over the country and all over the world that came there, and it was so different, feeling a different vibe at your track that you've been racing at for a few years.
Your home track that transforms itself.
It definitely changed karting for me when the Grands rolled around.
I never really had that at Sidekart. We had some bigger events locally, but they weren't super big, and so I never really got that feeling there. I did it when I would host the old NICA championship I ran for a year, the National Indoor Karting Association. That didn't last very long. But then obviously here at the Grands we did. But I actually remember getting that feeling, if you ever stuck around at the World Championship or even the USIKC, the National Championship, or even the 24 Hours, if you were ever there the next day for some reason, the hustle and bustle and craziness of the weekend was replaced, because they're an indoor track, so they're open for business the next day, right?
Right.
So everyone's everywhere, and it's just this city, its own thing that is living and breathing the entire week or weekend or whatever, and you go there the next day and it's crickets.
Yeah.
And you're like,
all the gears,
just
all the
hours
gears are
ago.
turning.
Yeah, and you just kind of get that, wow. It adds to that what I was just a part of.
Well,
feeling. You know?
I think you nailed it too. I mean, going from Super Series to the Grands, I'm like, man, the scale is so much bigger, and just, there's banners up there. There's there's coverage, there's announcing and all that stuff. I'm like, between that and how much I felt I learned in 3 days compared to a whole season,
right?
It's just so insane.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had good moments. I was on the cusp of making the super final, the few years I did it, but man, just thinking back to how intense and how just different karting felt. And that was when I really experienced this can be really competitive, more competitive than I've experienced in the 2 or 3 years I've been doing it already,
Right.
And to hear back, to hear about your guys' stories of the USIKC, and, it's here, it's traveling to, it's gone to South America, it's gone to Europe. And if you're going there, you're going to win.
You're committed. You
Yeah.
just spent, a couple grand on tickets, hotels
Before you even get on track.
Before you get on track. You've just studied the track like you wouldn't believe. You've just trained. They go there with so much already having happened that's why I say it's more like an endurance race, because it starts months before you go.
For sure.
Like the Grand Nationals. I mean, it starts months before we go. We are thinking about it and preparing and just realizing how important it is. And that aspect of racing is like the part that I say that if you haven't done one of those events yet, you have to do it, because you'll start to understand what we talk about when it's like, what it takes.
Right.
It is no minor task, man. The mountain is huge.
Yeah.
And so
it's a hell of a lot better coming from base camp than from the airport.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Totally.
Well, and so I've talked to you about it and all the and you obviously, but all the guys have done the 24 at VLK. And I can drive a sport car around here for a long time and feel pretty good. And coming from Mike is like, that ain't gonna be enough, man. And it's
no human is built for that, man.
Yeah.
You're so wrecked after that.
I'm like, but that is, I don't have a long bucket list. It's maybe 3 things, and doing the 24 at VLK just to experience it. That or the World Championship for karting. Like, man, that's probably a bigger priority than doing Supernats or Rio or anything like that, because Arrive and Drive is such a big place in my career,
Right.
and to go experience such a big part in history, whether indoor karting is the same as it was for you guys or not, that it is now, to go to that track and be a part of that event is something I just got to do when it comes back around.
You absolutely have to, man. Hopefully we'll all be there together, man.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
I keep giving Hans a hard time about the 24-hour. I mean, and he's got a good point. They have to shave off a little bit of revenue to do that, right? Because of their busiest Arrive and Drive times is then. And when we were doing the 24-hour on a regular basis, they weren't as busy as they are now. So,
right. It's changed.
Yeah. But yeah, for sure. Hopefully they put together the 24 before, and we can get a chance to do it again. And it's a freaking blast. And hopefully we get to the point where Derek can take off 2 weeks and go to Europe.
No shit, yeah.
And I could be there with him.
Exactly.
I think that's the clincher.
That is the clincher.
Before we put a cap on this thing, I definitely got to hit you up about this 2020 season. And I mean, we said at the very beginning, it just happened 2 days ago.
Yeah.
We've moved on.
No, we've shut off. On to 2021.
That's what everyone feels about this year.
Yeah,
anyway, right?
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, right about July, we were reopening up. We were already like,
let's call it.
I said it in the I've said it in the previews that we've talked about it. I said it in giving you the trophy on Saturday. That being a Masters driver to win it, you always showed up to try to win anyway. But I think for sure, trying to be the Masters champion would be nice. But the fact that Sergio Bravo was the Masters champ, and actually I looked it up. I'm not going to throw your guys' age out there, but let's say it starts with a 5. You guys are actually within about a year of the age you were.
Right.
Under a year, actually, because of where your guys' birthdays are. But a Masters driver who's encroaching on Grandmasters that is picking off the overall championship against certainly Sam Hunt, 16, fight, he's in his 30s or whatnot, but these younger guys.
Yep.
Ayrton, and all these other younger drivers, and some great talent, adding in newcomers like Paulo Franca and whatnot to the mix. In all the stuff you got a chance to do, you bring home this championship, this overall championship that's been right there, and I knew you wanted to get it. The Masters Championship was that way it was a couple years ago, and you got that. From then on, it was like, all right, I want to go for this other thing. You couldn't get the full season in. Coming into this year, you had already said, this is before COVID or like that. I'm talking to him. He's like, no, I'm all in. There was actually a time where he said, I don't know if I'm going to make the race. He's like, nah, I'm just kidding. I'm going to be there. he's just effing with me.
It worked.
And
doesn't work often with Mike.
Yeah.
It's you hoping he doesn't put you in the preview.
Exactly.
And then you show up.
Preview jinx. You come into this year and you were all in. You were all in from the get-go. You were going to make sure that you got it. You ran the Ironman Series races beforehand, and I knew it was pure practice because regardless of the result, your demeanor was always the same. You didn't get upset. It was like, okay, that was not the best of runs. That's not what I wanted. Maybe it was a tough draw or this or that. Whereas before, I've seen Diego Morales, even last year, like not stoked about something that had happened, right? Not this year. It was full focus on one thing. Masters champion twice now. Overall champion, only the second Masters guy to do it. I know it means a lot to you, but what does it actually mean to you to achieve this thing? As you say, kind of a lifetime goal.
Yeah. So I've had a chance to reflect on that. It's only been 48 hours or so. And it was transformational. I mean, I went into this knowing, very clearly how difficult this is anyway, right? And I just know that the level of commitment that I'm going to need to do is something that's probably going to surpass anything I've ever prepared for before. And while I was going through it, it did happen. World Championships, 24 hours VOK, 12 hours of Dromo. I've never prepared so hard as I have for this year. And I did it because as I was going through the championship and starting to knock off the targets, it became apparent that this is achievable and doable, and I knew that I would need to be in a better place physically, mentally, emotionally, everything. So this year I've learned so much about myself than in any other year that I've done racing. And that was transformative because in many conversations I've had with you, Mike, about what to do, how to handle things, should I think about strategy or just simple things. And you too, Derek. I mean, I've had these conversations about like, what should I do? What's the next thing? And then taking all of that and using the 30 years plus of experience that I have and forcing all that energy into this championship just transformed me. I am a different racer, and that's why this is so meaningful for me. It's like I I know how hard it is. I know how much I respect all the drivers here, and the level of competition is so intense. So for me to be able to pull it off at my age, I mean, I'm beyond belief happy about this. Like, this has been a dream come true because of all the things I'm mentioning, right? Like, all of the things that had to happen and fall in place in order for me to get here, and then for it to occur the way it did too. You know, there was a little bit of that as well, because you never know. I mean, sometimes it gets done early, or it goes down to the final. It went down to the final, and then it went down to like the real final. You know, like, it doesn't get any better than that. And that's another thing that, you know, I tell people. I go, racing is one thing, but you probably don't really understand the level of emotionality, the level of intelligence, the level of randomness that occurs, that gets thrown at you, and only you feel it. No one else is seeing that, and you're dealing with it, and you have to take all of the experience that you have in your life and offset those challenges and overcome them. And the victory, the feeling of success, is because you're succeeding with yourself. So that's why it means so much to me, man. It's like, I don't know. I was so nervous going into that final race. I was just a wreck. Patrick was great to be there and talk me through it a little bit. And I've been there before, but I was a wreck anyway, man.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. They always tell you when you get to those big moments in life, I mean, you can tell yourself all day long, stay calm, and you're not going to be calm.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. You got a few laps to go on that thing. And, you know, there was a time where you were second in that championship during that race.
Yeah.
Andreas Pareto's creeping up on P1, and you're creeping up on P10, and that's not going to cut it, buddy.
Right.
Yeah.
And
you end up winning by 13 points over the course of 8 rounds, and so on and so forth.
And I mean, even in that moment, what was interesting is I had to talk to myself, right? Have that conversation with myself, like going, okay, mathematically, this is not going your way. Now, what have you learned? And I was like having these discussions with myself.
And is it so funny how many, like, you'll talk to yourself in your head throughout a race, and depending on what you're saying, the tone of your voice will change to yourself. You know, it's like, no, like, idiot, can you not make that mistake again? Or it's like, all right, we need to get going. You know, the urgency. Yeah,
me and myself.
Yeah, but there's the urgency. I like how you put that, though. You know, you're talking to yourself, and these thoughts are happening within a few corners. You know,
like your mind is racing, right? Mm-hmm. Like
across 15 laps. You know, so.
And I just said, I go, just you know, again, the Senna concept. You know, everything I has inside of myself is what I'm going to be able to do here, and I trust that I'm going to be able to do that. And that's what I told myself: trust, keep doing it, don't get upset. And that so calming. And you know me, I'd be freaking out in the past.
Normally.
I would literally be destroying myself out there psychologically. And no, I just kept at it, and then I saw that it changed, and then I was able to make some moves, and I'm like, just keep doing the things that you've trained so hard to do.
Yeah.
And so when it came, and you know, it was just this like, whoosh, like, oh my God, I got it.
Did you know you had it when you crossed the line?
Kind of. I was not 100% sure because of the doubt of like, is there anything that I missed? You know, because I wasn't watching everything. I wasn't watching every lap to see if he actually scored any bonus points. But I did, when I did the math, I'm sitting there going, even if he had won, he would have still had to have scored enough lead laps to overcome the 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I was, but it didn't matter because, I mean, I crossed the line. And I'm like, oh,
your whole demeanor changes. And I, like, as soon as you cross the line, because I was watching, I'm like, I think he may have it.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you cross the line, you lift it. I'm like, well, now I have no idea because all these cars went past you.
Yeah.
But you went from being focused in the race, the checker drops, and you cross the line, and you let off and you chill out. And I just see it's not sad. It was relief.
Yeah, it was relief.
You know, I could tell you're just like, that is it.
Yeah.
You know, and
glad that's over.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully it adds up to the right amount.
Right. I mean, that's exactly what's going on in your mind. But there was a moment where I put my helmet in my hands because I was like, no, I think I got this. And it just was like, what does that mean now? I've crossed over, like, I don't know, just so much anticipation, so many years. All of my SPV teammates had one. I was the one that hadn't had it yet. And then also because I just, I know that, I'm not getting any younger. It's each year is going to get harder. And this year was so hard with throwing out my back. I mean, like knowing that this year I wanted to do it, and I had to deal with that during the middle of the season. So many challenges. COVID. I mean, anybody racing this year, period. It's like you're dealing with your work, your family, all that, and then you also still have to get prepared and then do this. So I feel like this will never be forgotten. It'll be just one of my highlights, and among my peers, be able to have so many people have wonderful conversations about it afterwards, and the words that were said they're just touching, and yeah, man, I mean, shoot, I've been on cloud 9 for 48 hours,
So I mean, you're one of the field guards left, from when this place first opened and started doing Arrive and Drive. We were talking, after each Super Series race, we're always bullshitting bench racing after.
That's
it's
the
a
best
group
part.
of us, right? But one of the parts that, and I agree with this 100%, that Mark Connell brought up was how passionate you are, crossing the line on every win. And you'll see it in the podium pictures. And this was cool because it was passionate, but it wasn't so much excitement. It was just enjoying the moment,
right?
At this winning this championship. So that's one of the things I've always thought was really cool for how long you've been doing Arrive and Drive here, and being a veteran in the Super Series. The passion and winning has never gotten old for you, I guess you could say.
Right.
You've always appreciated every time you get that top spot, or even on the podium.
Yeah,
like going back to the final 3 laps, like the guy you're battling for in the points, he's in contention for winning the race, and you're off in 10th.
Yeah.
Which, hearing that, you're like, oh, why is the guy leading the points back in 10th? There's that much depth in this series.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shuffle all the time amongst that top 10 for who's on the podium, and for you to be in 10th, and you're like, I'm holding on for 10th to make sure I can get these points. Like, that's no easy task with how deep this field is, and for you to come out on top is awesome, dude.
Yeah, do it on a regular basis.
Yeah,
led the series and top 5 finishes in the main. I mean, it wasn't like you mathematically got the job done.
No,
you got it done all year.
And I mean, even during the day, I mean, the rounds could have gone very differently. I mean, when we clicked off, and the thing that I was thinking about, and I'm going to address what you brought up, Derek, in a minute, but it's that Andres and I have had this thing, and he's always been able to out-qualify me, or when qualifying is a thing, that's his thing. And I out-qualified him, and I made sure he understood that.
See, I've always said Diego Morales is the full package, because he'll try to mess with you mentally. And you do this in the indoor stuff. Well, I've always seen him have these conversations with people and whatnot. And I knew that he plays mental games with people. Mm-hmm. I knew this because he'd done it to some of my drivers when I was having my team.
I've heard stories about that. Yeah.
And I've always figured that if you are one to play the game, you could be susceptible to said game.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that to Diego once. So which maybe I'll tell you another time, but it's awesome that even now, it's still the same Diego I remember from over a decade ago doing the same damn thing.
That's right, man.
So you're letting him know, check 1 box for me, baby.
That's right. Can you keep up? And then that helps, and it's that being in the moment comment you made, because Mark brought that up, and I mentioned that in life, the reason why racing is what it is for me, one of the main reasons, is that it definitely keeps me young and happy that I can be competitive at this age, right? And that's become a theme of mine. And the theme started with Bill Myers. One day came up to us after a Dromo event, and he goes, "See, Diego," and this is totally Bill Myers. "See, Diego, we're not here to race. We're here to entertain." And that stuck with me. Like, the reason why I get up on the podium and do what I do, or I cross the finish line and do what I do, is because I do truly believe that the only reason why you can enjoy this sport so much is if you have fun with it. and I have fun doing those things. I'll never, ever stop doing that. That to me is why I do it. I don't want to do it just because it's a check of the box or add points to this thing. I want to do it because I'm having fun.
Right.
And as long as I'm having fun, I'm going to do it till I'm 90, and I'll feel like that's the kid inside of me. So, but why did I get there? And then, so this is even deeper now. Truly, I think my mom, growing up, she was such an amazing mentor to me. What she taught me to do is to live in the moment. And that is so true of anybody and doing anything in life. If you can live in the moment and you are valuing everything that's there that you need for yourself. If you're living in the future or living in the past, you're just doing something for another reason. That one is the true reason. And so I've lived that philosophy, and that's why I think I embraced that aspect of it, So you'll always see me do those things, man.
I like it.
The antics will get more crazier, but I have to say one more story real quick because it was hilarious. So you talk about the mind games. And Andres Prieto, this is for you. So Andres, him and I are texting each other. We've been kind of a little light bantering like we do. We know what's at stake, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun to have that edginess. And so he reaches out to me and asks me some question. I forget what it was. And I think it was more about machismo or something like that. And then, no. Oh, that's right. This is what it was. I noticed he was the last name on the list of the sign up.
Oh, right.
So I go, hey, dude, did you just forget to sign up and CalSpeed called you and that's the only reason why you got into this event? And he's like, no, I did it on purpose. And I'm like, uh-huh, or maybe not, ha, 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 right?
Right.
And then he goes, mind games. And I go, oh, okay, that's fine. I go, oh, by the way, did you see and later on in the conversation, I go, did you see they changed the rules? This is a really cool thing.
Oh, this is funny.
Yeah.
And I go, go read about it. And I did it very subtly because that way I challenge him to go. And he goes, no, what do you mean? And I go, oh, they have this thing where they decided that they're going to requalify for the super final for the A. And I knew that he would love that, right? He wasn't even going to think if that's a possibility to rule. He's just thinking, oh my God, I get to requalify.
He showed up on Friday and asked me if that was true.
Exactly.
And I'm like, who told you that? He's like, Diego. I'm like, you're really going to trust Diego? I'm like,
on the eve before the race,
the guy that you're fighting for the championship, you're really going to eat what he's feeding you?
And not only that, friggin' Derek comes over the radio. I'm working on the friggin' speech that I'm still working on Friday evening or Friday afternoon.
Right.
And he goes, hey, Derek, who should know the rules front to back, but Derek comes over the thing. He goes, hey, is the final worth double points? And I'm like, no, why? He goes, well, Andreas is here and he's asking about double points. I'm like, tell Andreas he's an idiot. But no, we're not doing double points.
It was so
and now that I've got this, I'm like, freaking Diego Morales.
I planted this and it worked, dude. I had him totally going for it. And again, these are the things I think about because it's not just the racing, it's everything. You have to think the whole thing. If you're doing the whole thing and you're strategizing, you could beat people either mentally, on the track, before, after. I mean, that's part of it too.
Yeah.
And Mike knows this really well
right,
too.
and
Right.
I guess I will tell the quick Diego Morales mental game story.
Okay, here we go.
Diego was playing some mental games with some of my younger, less experienced drivers on my team. And he was successful for the most part. And I had to get him back in some way, shape, or form. So it just so happens that on one of the days of I want to say it's the US Championship.
It was the US, I can see, yep.
And he gets in a kart, and I know the kart's, it's not the easiest thing on the planet, but it's good. You just have to adapt to it. And I had a pretty good reputation for adaptation, so not that Diego didn't, but I wasn't sure, and I figured that maybe I could throw him off a little bit if I mess with him.
Oh, man.
And because the thing was you had to adapt to it. So some people were really struggling in this department, and they couldn't cut the same kind of lap times, versus other guys could. And I know this during practice. This is like the first race of this particular day in this particular track. Well, I had driven it, this exact kart, in practice the previous day or whatever, a couple days before. So I knew it was a solid ride. I go, oh, Diego, that's going to be a tough ride right there, dude. Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know if you're going to be able to. Hey, if you can get a top 5 out of this thing, solid. That's really good. And he goes out and he has an okay run, but it might have been a drop or something like that. I was like, oh man, nice job. And I'm just smiling. I'm stoked because I have it next. I have the exact same go-kart next. And I go out and I get pole. I win. And I get maximum points. Fast lap of the race.
Right.
And he's just like, what? I'm like, you just had to adapt to it, man. I knew the kart was good, and I let him know right away that was what had happened because I had to go, don't F with my drivers anymore. Just leave them alone.
Conveniently, this guy went on to run the track that you now race at for who knows how many years, and you're like, you just got to adapt to it.
Right.
I do all the testing. And yeah. Oh, my God. Oh, man. Diego, we've got years of experience hanging out with each other and both as competitors, as teammates, as customer and whatnot. And it's really special for me to have you on the show here, especially our season finale of the first run through.
Yeah,
right after your big championship and whatnot. And man, I got to tell you, this has been a hell of a lot of fun.
This has been a really cool story to hear, for sure.
And thank you, guys. This has been a lot of fun for me, too, man.
And after all
thank you
these,
for having me. Really appreciate it.
For sure. And I got a feeling,
We really wanted Sergio, but he was busy today. So we settled.
Now you're mind gaming with me.
We settled.
Oh, man. Diego Morales, thanks so much, brother. And I'm sure we'll be doing another one of these things soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.